Chapter 448. The two swords were made by the god of fire and had the same origin. No one knew how many times they had clashed. However, Sia, who had always been knocked back, had only taken half a step back this time. The strong wind created by the collision of the two swords swept across the area within a radius of several miles. "Your power has increased by so much?" As the person who knew her best, Diana was quite clear about her strength. The two of them had sparred countless times, and she was the one who had the most right to speak. "Indeed, this is the power that my body should be able to exert now." The benefits of the heroic spirit transformation were not only to train her spiritual power, but also to filter out the remnants in her body through the process of decomposition and reconstruction. The messy divine power that Thea had absorbed before came from different gods, and even different divine systems. Although it was downgraded to magic power, there were still a lot of impurities in the energy. This decomposition and reconstruction was equivalent to remaking her body from scratch. There were no more remnants of Ares or Horus, and all the power belonged to her. Relaxed, soothing, and simple could be used to describe her physical condition. Even if it was just a simple comparison of appearance, she was not inferior to Diana. Objectively speaking, she was now like a new demigod. The effect of the reconstruction was heaven-defying, and the heroic spirit transformation was only one of the countless functions of the Holy Sword, and it was also one of the inconspicuous functions. From this, one could see how extraordinary the Holy Sword was. She needed to adapt to a new body, and so did her fighting style. It was like Batman knew Wing Chun, but he did not use it usually. This boxing style was not suitable for his burly body. Thea's skyrocketing strength was now facing the same problem. Many of the moves that used to be easy to use now felt strange when she used them. It was not the problem of the moves, but that she was no longer suitable for these moves. Diana did not hold back just because her moves were sloppy. She held a shield in her left hand and a sword in her right hand. She did not practice as many martial arts as Thea, and she was very familiar with a set of boxing style and a set of sword and shield attacks. Although Sia was very familiar with her martial arts, she was still flustered. Under the strong pressure, the martial arts she had mastered were also in a state of rapid integration. It was impossible for her to defeat someone with a move without a move. However, she was able to use the best moves of various sections. Whether it was the royal court swordsmanship or the Japanese swordsmanship, any move that was suitable for her was a good move. Get in the way. Sensing that Thea's strength was not much inferior to her own, Diana threw away her shield and held her sword with both hands, attacking like a storm. It turned out that Diana's overall strength was still higher than Thea's. Her strength, endurance, reflexes, and speed were all better than Thea's. The young lady could accept this fact. After all, although her magic power had dropped by 30%, she was still a mage at her core. It would be strange if a mage like her could fight against a pure warrior like Diana with her body. Based on her usual personality, she would have unleashed all her skills and fought for victory. However, after fusing with her two doppelgangers, she had gotten rid of all distracting thoughts. Her state of mind was very calm. It was no big deal if she lost, but it would be strange if she won. Move by move, she calmed her mind and tried her best to deal with Diana's attacks. From time to time, she would even counterattack. The two of them were fighting very seriously. Diana had not engaged in this kind of pure martial arts competition for a long time. In the past, Thea used to train with her using magic and martial arts. In the middle, she would add in fear impact from time to time. It was not the path of a pure warrior, which made her very sullen. There were not many people on Earth who could fight with her. Fiora could only be said to have known her through her relationship with Thea. It was okay to spar once in a while, but it was not okay to do so too many times. The two of them did not have such a friendship. As for Superman, Diana wanted to experience his skills. Unfortunately, Student Clark was so busy every day that his remaining spare time was filled by Louise. He did not have the time to spar with Diana. It could be said that after leaving the island for 100 years, this female demigod who was a warrior to her bones had been bored to death. Now that she saw that Thea's close combat ability had improved by leaps and bounds, in terms of happiness, perhaps she was not inferior to Thea. The two of them began to unleash their energy without restraint. One of them slashed a ditch with her sword, and the other punched a wind wall with her fist. On the desertified planet, Rocks were constantly blown away by the aftershocks of their fight. The planet's atmosphere was also rumbling because of the aftershocks of the fight. It was as if a typhoon had wreaked havoc within a radius of 100 miles. And in the eye of the storm were the two beautiful ladies. The two of them fought for a long time. Even the demigod's body was a little tired. Diana took advantage of the moment when she turned around in the air to jump up and punch her. Thea realized that this might be her last punch. She also mobilized all the strength in her body. She twisted her waist and bent her arms. At the same time, she drew out a weak wisp of power of will from the spiritual world. She secretly said to herself, "I can do it, I can do it." A faint golden light wrapped around her jade-white arm. This light flickered slightly and disappeared without a trace, as if it had never existed. Bang! There was a loud explosion at the point where the two of them collided. An invisible shock wave swept out in all directions with the two of them as the center. Diana fell back to the ground. Her feet plowed a deep trench in the heavily weathered ground. She retreated more than 10 meters. Thea was in midair. She somersaulted 7 or 8 times before coming to a stop in the air. What a strange power! Diana had fought with Thea countless times. She was very familiar with several kinds of power that she had. This was not magic power or emotional power. It was a bit like divine power, but not exactly. Let's go. We'll talk about it in detail when we get back. After Thea finished speaking, she changed her clothes. The clothes she was wearing earlier were all torn. With their current fighting strength, ordinary clothes would be torn apart in a few moves. This was also the value of Diana's armor. Not to mention its defensive power, its blocking effect was just perfect. They returned to Diana's apartment through a portal. The two of them were covered in dirt. They took a simple shower. Both of them were exhausted. They had been fighting all day long, so they did not have the energy to do it today. They ordered takeout for 10 people. The young lady took the large pile of food under the surprised gaze of the delivery man. The two of them sat on the ground and chatted as they ate, as if they were on Paradise Island. Power of will? This seems to be something described in the religious scriptures, right? Diana asked in a muffled voice as she swallowed half a pizza. Sia was gnawing on a drumstick in an unladylike manner. This food was really dispensable to them. If they wanted to replenish their energy, even 100 servings wouldn't be enough. They were just greedy for this little bit of food. Power of will is the name I gave it. It's like this. Thea blabbered on about the effect of the ability, hoping that Diana could help her think of ideas. Although she was not as good as Batman or Luther, Diana was also blessed by Athena's wisdom. She was also quite intelligent, but she was more used to using her fists to reason. Chapter 449. As a female warrior born in the Amazon, Diana didn't know etiquette at first, but after more than 100 years in human society, she had learned a little. She wiped the oil stains on her hands and counted with her fingers to think of a solution for her. I think there are a few ways to get credit. First of all, eliminate discrimination between men and women. I've been doing this for more than 10 years. If you were to do it, the effect wouldn't be much. Diana was really worried about this matter, and Thea did not have any good ideas. She nodded. This was the general situation, and it had nothing to do with wisdom. Secondly, eliminate war, save children, and pay attention to the vulnerable, provide them with some work opportunities, provide free medical treatment, help people below the poverty line. It was obvious that Diana had been paying attention to these social issues, but her words carried little weight, and she did not have a good way to promote this matter. Not only did she have a headache over these issues, Sia also found it extremely difficult to deal with them. To put it in an exaggerated way, if she took Moira's speech during the mayoral election, there were tens of thousands of words on it. Every politician had promised a bunch of things to the voters, but it was still the same. For thousands of years in human society, there were so many people in high positions and selfless politicians who could not do it, and the two of them, demigods, could not do it. Thea pondered for a moment. The national gene injection was definitely not possible, but some special drugs that could cure terminal diseases at the genetic level could be manufactured and put into the market at a low price to see the reaction. She was just about to speak when she was startled by a palpitating heart. Something seemed to have happened in a very distant place. Diana's level was high, but a pure warrior's reaction to abnormalities was not as sensitive as her. She saw that she was halfway through her sentence and carefully felt the changes around her. But unfortunately, she did not feel anything. Our world seems to have a hole in it? Thea had secretly made a lot of arrangements before. She did not know which one was activated, but her intuition told her that it was a big deal. The two women did not have time to talk. They flew out of the atmosphere, and Thea looked into the distance. At the same time, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, on a small island in the Azores, the buildings that were originally full of indigenous style were crowded today. After the famous archaeologist Dr. Daniel Evans received mysterious financial support, he stole the trident of the Sea King Arthur Curry, a few years in advance in the original time and space. He led a large group of media reporters to open the so-called Gate of Atlantis. What the reporters at the scene recorded was not a glorious era, nor was it a treasure of an ancient civilization. This middle-aged man with an elegant temperament opened a passage that had been sealed for tens of thousands of years. Countless giant creatures that had been sealed by the Atlanteans and the Greek gods were released from the passage. The cameras were pushed down, and a few reporters who were close to him were torn to pieces on the spot. The rest of the people ran away, but they forgot that this was a small island and they had nowhere to run. The giant creatures did not touch Dr. Evans, who was already dumbfounded. It was not that they were merciful, but they wanted to continue mocking this upright middle-aged man. Thea saw this scene and secretly sighed in relief. Fortunately, when the barrier between the two worlds was broken, she sensed it. Otherwise, the casualties would be greater. She was the one who instructed the Court of Owls to transfer the mysterious funds that Dr. Evans received. Her purpose was to release the Greek hero Hercules, who was trapped on the other side of the passage, and obtain enough divine power of the earth attribute to establish a complete magic cycle. Although it was Dr. Evans who stole the trident, and it was the giant creatures who bewitched him to open the passage to the balance of order, she was also an important participant in this matter. The weight on the side of chaos was heavily added, and both sides were almost equal, which made her heart ache. She asked Diana to put on her equipment, and she hesitated for a moment. It was not time for her to officially stand in front of all the media, so she also put on her hood, and the two women were directly teleported to the small island. From the time the doctor opened the passage to the time when Thea and Diana arrived at the scene, it was less than 30 seconds, but the situation had deteriorated to the extreme. The giant creatures seemed to be playing with toys, and dozens of humans were torn apart by them at will. The smell of blood on the scene was extremely strong. "Stop!" Thea shouted. The two of them suddenly appeared, and most of the ordinary people were already scared out of their wits. They did not notice them at all, but the giant creatures knew what was good for them. The two women were pure demigods, and they could not help but be vigilant. However, it was the young lady who shouted for them to stop. In fact, she did not have the intention to stop at all. She just felt that it was inappropriate to start fighting without saying a word, so she shouted to strengthen the momentum. These giant creatures all represented the consciousness of chaos. Killing one of them was greater than saving 100 ordinary people. At the same time, the sacred sword also transmitted a strong fighting spirit to her. Thea immediately made a decision. Today, she would use these evil descendants of the giants as the beginning of the revival of the sacred sword's glory. Thea held the sacred sword with both hands, jumped 10 meters high, and stabbed the sacred sword, which was overflowing with 7-colored light, into a red monster with wings and a bloody mouth in the middle of its body. The eyes on the monster's 2 shoulders were still confused. "Didn't you say to stop? You were the one who shouted so loudly just now, right?" However, before he could express his dissatisfaction, the sacred sword had already completely purified him. Taking advantage of the enemy's confusion, she separately beheaded 2 more winged creatures. Diana had been cooperating with her for a long time, and she did not hesitate. Like cutting a melon, she cut down a colorful monster that seemed to have the ability to turn invisible. Shameless surface demigods. Kill them. The leader of the giant creatures was a female giant creature with a snake's body and long hair. Her entire body was dark green, and she had 2 wings and 4 arms. Their population was not large to begin with. When they were sealed 10,000 years ago, there were more than 1,000 of them. Now that they had broken out of the seal, there were less than 50 of them. Unexpectedly, in the blink of an eye, 4 of them were killed by Thea and the others. This made the snake woman extremely angry. Visible ripples burst out from her blood-red eyes, and Dr. Evans, who was very close to her, was directly sent flying. Mental attack. Thea was very disdainful. This was her leftover skill. This skill was very effective against small groups of soldiers, and it was very cool to see a large number of them fall like wheat. However, it was not practical in a battle of the same level. No matter whether it was herself or Diana, both of them had extremely high mental resistance. If they focused their mental power on a single point, it might be effective, but if they spread it out in such a large area, the damage would be negligible. Realizing that the snake woman did not have much combat experience, Thea turned the footsteps that were originally aimed at her and exchanged 2 blows with a purple vine-like creature with mouths all over its body. This creature drilled in and out of the ground, and it took her some effort. She used a hard earth spell to delay the creature's drilling, and then swung her sacred sword and cut the creature into 3 pieces. She still felt that it was not safe, so she stabbed the creature twice more until it turned into ashes. Only then did she move on to the next enemy. Chapter 450. Surround them. Overwhelm them with numbers. The snake woman was obviously not good at hand-to-hand combat. She hid far away and began to command. From time to time she would send out mental attacks, sound waves, and charm spells. As a few powerful monsters gave up on killing ordinary people and returned to the island, Thea and Diana were under more and more pressure. However, they did not complain. Thea felt that this was her fault, and she had no qualms about it. Diana felt that it was her duty to destroy these guys. The 2 women relied on their skillful martial arts and divine armor to deal with dozens of enemies. Their main targets were those who could fly and those who could turn invisible. They would kill these enemies first and deal with the remaining few who had thick skin and flesh. Be careful. Thea kicked Superman's good friend, Jimmy Olsen. Today, the Daily Planet sent this camera-turned reporter. This kid was really unlucky. The death-courting experts, Louise Ryan and Clark Kent, went to investigate another big piece of news. The newspaper office didn't believe that Dr. Evans could come up with anything new, so they sent the intern reporter to the Azores. This kid was indeed one of Superman's Iron Triangle. He was very lucky. There were not many people left on the island, but he was still alive and kicking on the front line. This guy was also very careless. He did not forget his job at all. He raised his camera and took pictures. The sound of his camera not only attracted the enemy, but also Thea. Seeing the enemy spit out acid rain, Thea could not watch this guy die in front of her. She gave up on the enemy and kicked him away. Stay away. Seeing that this guy wanted to ask a few more questions, Thea had to use Magician's hand to pull him away from the scene. She looked around and pulled Dr. Evans, who was holding a trident, to the side to accompany Jimmy Olsen. If you want to interview someone, you can interview the person involved. With the troublemaker gone, the battle had reached a stalemate. Thea and the others could no longer move as they pleased. The enemy had cunningly used a few large monsters to block their movement space. Fear had little effect on these evil and chaotic creatures. After the 2 girls worked together to slay a monster that could absorb life force like seaweed, they finally stood back to back, panting. Originally, their physical strength had not recovered after the battle, and now that they were in a bitter battle, they could only use 60% of their usual strength. It was extremely difficult for them to fight. Hold on, I think reinforcements are coming. Thea cut off a monster's arm with her sword. No problem, I can still hold on. Diana used a lasso to catch a monster, pulled it in front of her and stabbed it to death. Stop! At this time, another roar came from the beach. Unfortunately, the monsters did not fall for it anymore. We may be naive, but we are not stupid. You humans have shouted for us to stop twice in less than 10 minutes. You want us to fall for it twice? How could this be? The group of people continued to besiege the 2 girls as if they didn't hear anything. What happened? Give me back my trident. The Sea King, Arthur Curry, who had swum for tens of thousands of miles, landed on the island like a god descending from the sky. The result of his loud shout was that no one cared about him. He was a little puzzled and happened to see Dr. Evans holding the trident. The middle-aged man also knew that he had made a terrible mistake. If the 2 girls had not jumped out to fight to the death, who knows what would have happened. He threw the trident back to the Sea King. Arthur, I'm sorry. You can kill me, but please help the two girls. They can't hold on any longer. The Sea King wanted to see who was being besieged, but the group of giant creatures surrounded him. He did not have the ability to fly, so he stretched his neck to look at the outside for a long time. He could only see that the fight was lively inside. From time to time, broken limbs of monsters were sent flying. He stood for a while, but no one cared about him. Arthur, come and help. He could not see, but Thea saw him with her supervision. Although he was not as good as Superman, he was still a strong general. Hearing Thea's voice, the Sea King breathed a sigh of relief. He knew the combat power of the two girls and knew that they would be fine for a while. There was no need for him to go in and save them. If they could not hold on, he would be a dead end. His combat awareness was good. He looked at the enemies on the battlefield and found that Thea and the girls were prioritizing those who could fly and run fast. He immediately understood the intention of the two girls. Thunder flashed on the trident, and he attacked a winged monster. Not long after he joined the battle, Mela, who was always by his side, also arrived. The island was not big, and it was surrounded by seawater. Her ability to control water was at its peak, and countless water and ice arrows rained down on the giant creatures. The continuous killing of the four of them was indeed extraordinary, but injuries were inevitable. Thea had taken off her hood, revealing her long golden hair. The hood could be used normally, but it blocked her vision when she was surrounded. Although she used all her power, her right hand was still injured, and she could only hold the sword with her left hand. The giant creatures were the descendants of giants and Gaia's evil consciousness. They had surprisingly high magic resistance, mental resistance, and physical attack power. They had almost no weaknesses, and Thea could not use many of her methods. She could only fight with brute force. If she had not merged with her doppelganger, which increased her physical attack power, it would have been more difficult to deal with these enemies. Diana wasn't having a good time either. She was injured by an arrow shot by an enemy that looked like a purple-skinned tree. There was a bloody hole in her sturdy thigh. The enemy's attack was extremely corrosive. Even with her demigod body, she couldn't recover from it and could only fight with a limp. If she had known, she would not have fought with Diana. Thea felt that after Merlin abandoned his sword, her luck was a little bad. If the two of them were in good condition, they would not have to fight so hard. Use the power of will. She alone had killed 7 or 8 giant creatures, and the order scale was very satisfied. After canceling out the matter of secretly supporting Dr. Evans, there was still a lot of power of will left. Recover our physical strength and injuries. Thea chanted silently. In a place where they could not see, an obscure white light shone, and the two girls' physical strength rapidly rose. However, their injuries were only half healed, and before they could fully recover, their power of will was exhausted. They threw 2 more healing gems, and more or less relieved their injuries. The snake woman had been observing the situation from the periphery. At this time she smiled sinisterly, and her sharp teeth shone with a cold light. Greeks and Atlanteans? Do you think that only the giant creatures are your enemies? Too naive. I'll let you see a real nightmare, this friend who has been with us for tens of thousands of years. Before she could finish her sentence, the entrance of the passage that they had escaped from was suddenly blasted open. Rubble flew everywhere and smoke lingered in the air. The violent reaction of divine power startled Diana. Sia hurriedly flew over to protect her, and only then did they manage to resolve the danger. Amidst the deafening roar, a muscular figure rushed out from the tunnel. Chapter 451. In front of a group of monsters that were a few meters tall, the 3-meter-tall man who rushed out was not conspicuous, but the power that overflowed from his body was enough to attract everyone's attention. The man's head and waist were wrapped in animal skin, and his naked upper body was full of explosive muscles. 2 ferocious dragon heads were used as shoulder pads, and through the animal skin, one could see his bearded face and a pair of crazy eyes. Even if one could not see his face, one could feel the oppressive feeling in the air. Hercules. Diana was really a little surprised. This was the interesting part of Greek mythology. Other than a few old ones, the rest were all brothers and sisters. They were all created by the loving uncle Zeus. Whether it was Apollo or Ares, including Diana and Hercules in front of them, their mothers included all kinds of races and levels. There were mortals, demigods, and true gods, but there was only one father. Diana did not expect that other than Ares, she could see another living brother, who was very mechanically dealing with the attacks of the giant creatures. She looked at Thea. The Missy also pretended that she had just found out. She was 70% puzzled and 30% shocked. She was not a child of Zeus, so this expression was just right. Kill. Kill all of them. They are all traitors. Think about the despair you felt when they betrayed you and you were alone in the abyss. The snake woman did not dare to get too close to Hercules. She only used her charming voice to stir up his emotions from afar. Hercules' gaze became crazier and crazier. His chest was undulating, and the steel-like muscles all over his body were visibly bigger. Even from afar, one could hear his heavy breathing. Ah! Atlantean, I'm going to tear you apart. Hercules looked around. Just like when the Sea King first arrived, he did not see the two women who were surrounded by a few giant creatures that were as big as mountains of flesh. Instead, he saw the Sea King, who seemed to be very muscular and was attacking fiercely with a trident in his hand. This guy must be his enemy. Without thinking, Hercules stomped his feet violently on the ground, creating a gust of wind as he raised his huge fist at the Sea King. The Sea King had heard Diana's exclamation before, and he knew that she was a god who was famous for her strength. If she had been an ordinary person, he would have punched her back with his fiery temper. However, he chose to avoid the mighty Hercules. His plan was very good. He wanted to build up his strength in one go, weaken in the second, and exhaust in the third. Unfortunately, he underestimated the power of Hercules. If he only relied on 3 axes, this son of Zeus, the Lion of Olympus, who was not favored by Zeus, would not have lived to this day. Having fought against the giant creatures alone for 10,000 years, his physical strength was almost limitless, and his martial arts had also reached the peak. Although he was now driven crazy by the giant creatures' whispers for 10,000 years, his fighting strength was not affected in the slightest. The combination of punches forced the Sea King to retreat continuously. In less than 10 moves, he grabbed the Sea King and raised him above his head, intending to tear him apart. Let him go. The 3 women, for different reasons, came to the rescue at the same time. Mira's eyes were almost red, and ice arrows as thick as an arm rained down on Hercules. Diana also threw out the lasso of truth, binding one of his arms. Thea also took out the silver moon bow, knocked Zeus' lightning arrow, and shot an arrow at Hercules' chest as fast as lightning. The Sea King, who was raised in the air, was not completely helpless. His natural ability allowed him to control all aquatic creatures. When he saw a giant creature that looked like a catfish beside him, he did not care about anything else and directly took control of it. His ability was indeed powerful. The other party only resisted a little and was controlled. Then it opened its bloody mouth and bit down on Hercules' head. Hercules only felt his vision go black, and his vision was covered by a stinky object. He wanted to tear this unknown object away, but his arm was tied up by Diana, and his body was shot by Thea. The familiar smell told him that the arrow contained his father's divine power. In addition, Mira had opened a few holes on his body, so he had no choice but to throw the Sea King out. After struggling for a while, Diana's strength was also not bad. She pulled the lasso tightly. Hercules' right arm did not move at all. He could already feel the giant creature under the Sea King's control biting his neck. He used his free hand to hit the giant creature's head. His heavy fists were like thunder, and every hit made a bloody hole in the giant creature's head. An unknown liquid gurgled out. Very powerful. I underestimated you. The snake woman was still watching the show. She did not expect a blue lightning arrow to directly penetrate her chest. Before she could say a word, she was shot to death by Thea. I've hated you for a long time, trash. Thea spat out a mouthful of turbid air. In the midst of the chaos, she shot 2 arrows. The one that was shot at Hercules was a simple arrow, while the one that was shot at the snake woman was a real lightning arrow with magic power. No matter how high their magic resistance was, they could not ignore Thea's strongest attack. Moreover, this fellow was only good at charm. Her own strength was weak. A big hole was opened in her chest, and she fell to the ground with a look of unwillingness. Without her secretly controlling and commanding, Many of the giant creatures that were not so smart fell into chaos. Thea and Diana finally fought their way out of the encirclement. Mira, come help me. Diana, go help Arthur. They had basically killed all the giant creatures that could fly. The remaining ones were all ground units. Mira's ice arrow was actually a physical attack. Together with Thea's lightning arrow, the two of them were most suitable to deal with the remaining giant creatures in the air. Diana was also eager to chat with this crazy brother. Holding a shield, she replaced the Sea King who was in danger. Thea was dealing with the enemies below, while paying attention to Diana's battle. After a few glances, she discovered the problem. Diana's hands were tied, and there was a gap in strength. She was like a bowling ball fighting from the east to the west, and then from the north to the south. Thinking back to the original time and space, the Sea King seemed to have defeated him underwater. She immediately shouted, "Pull him into the water, Arthur can defeat him underwater." The Sea King gave her a thumbs up, which meant that she had good taste. Thea began to continuously shoot arrows at Hercules' back. Diana's lasso showed its power again, and Mira also controlled a large amount of seawater to help pull. Some pulled, and some pushed. The cooperation of the three women was really good. Hercules' feet plowed 2 deep trenches in the ground. He roared repeatedly, but the three of them were determined to pull him down. No matter how angry he was, it was useless. Plop! Thea dug a hole under Hercules' feet. He missed a step and stumbled. Diana suddenly exerted her strength, and the Sea King also pulled with her. The two of them were like a tug of war, dragging Hercules into the water. "Leave this to me, you go help too," Thea said to Mira. The couple's combat power underwater was immeasurable. She was too lazy to go underwater, and these targets on land were left to her to deal with. This arrangement was the most suitable since she could gain glory and willpower. Chapter 452. Mela looked at the battlefield. There were only a few enemies left that could not fly. Her ice arrows were not very effective against these thick-skinned monsters. She nodded. "Be careful." With that, she leaped up and dove into the depths of the sea to help the Sea King with a graceful dive. Even though they were separated by layers of seawater, Sia could see the intensity of the battle below. The Sea King, who was almost invincible in the water, was blocking the Hercules. Diana could only do some supporting work, and with Mira also entering the water to fight, she was a little helpless. Diana was not worried that the Sea King couple would kill Hercules. She swam out of the water to help Thea clear the monsters on the island. Without Hercules' interference and without the Snake Woman's control, these giant creatures that only knew how to destroy were no match for the two women who cooperated with each other skillfully. Diana used a trap, while Sonia used a holy sword. Diana used a sword and shield, while Sonia used a bow and arrow. The two of them could switch between melee and ranged attacks at any time. A monster fell to the ground every 10 seconds. The fewer there were, the less pressure the two women felt. Thea used her power of vow again to recover some of their strength and injuries. Finally, they killed all the ancient monsters. The sea in the distance was still rolling with huge waves. It was obvious that it would not be easy for the Sea King couple to take care of the Lion of Olympus underwater. However, Thea was not worried about them. As long as there was seawater, the two of them had almost unlimited recovery. Unless they were the kind of people who could kill in one move, not many people could defeat the Sea King underwater. Moreover, the deduction of a portion of Sia's research funds to support Professor Evans was caused by the Sea King randomly throwing the trident around, which was why someone had taken advantage of the loophole. The couple was destined to be in trouble this time, and Sia had only brought this matter forward slightly. The scene was a mess. Thea had purified the monsters at first, but later found that purifying also consumed some of her strength. She quickly turned off the purifying function. At this time, the central area of the island was full of monsters that had been killed by them. There were all kinds of monsters and none of them were similar. Some were bleeding, some were bleeding purple, and some were directly turned into stone. "You're the one from Quinn Group?" Jimmy Olsen, who was not far from the battlefield, heard that the commotion had died down. Together with Dr. Evans, he gathered his courage and came to observe. He had good eyesight and immediately saw Thea, who had taken off her hood. "You've got the wrong person," Thea replied without thinking as she was dealing the final blow to the monsters. Now that her hair had turned blonde and her looks had improved, Jimmy Olsen was still in shock and wasn't very sure. At the same time, he felt that it was a little beyond his imagination for a billionaire to come to such a godforsaken island to maintain world peace. However, he was still prepared to return and talk to his good friend, Clark Kent, about his near-death experience today. Thea used her supervision to observe the vicinity of the island. After confirming that there was nothing left out, they went into the water to help the Sea King couple. "We can deal with him." The Sea King didn't know what Thea was doing behind his back. He thought that the trouble this time was caused by himself. He was already very grateful to the two women for helping him clear the monsters on the island. If he didn't do anything, he would feel ashamed. He wanted to take down the big guy in front of him with his own strength. Originally, his strength had increased exponentially underwater. Now that there was some pressure, he was able to exert 1,000% of his strength. It wasn't that Hercules couldn't fight in the water, it was just that he wasn't used to being off the ground. One of their strengths increased while the other decreased, and they began to beat each other up, unwilling to admit defeat. The huge current was turned into a whirlpool by the two's powerful strength. The fishes and shrimps had long fled. Mela's eyes were emitting a blue light. Her superpower was used to the extreme. From time to time, giant monsters formed from seawater would pounce on Hercules. Looking at the crazy Hercules, Diana hesitated and asked Thea, "Can he still recover his consciousness?" Thea had thought about this problem before and made several plans. Now that she saw the real person, she only felt that it was several times more complicated than she expected. Hercules's will was as hard as steel. It was difficult for such a person to be corroded, but once he lost his mind, it would be even more difficult to recover. The snake woman who was shot to death by her arrow must have been corroded by thousands of years to slowly disintegrate Hercules's mind. Even so, she drove Hercules crazy instead of becoming a puppet under her control. From this, one could see how tenacious Hercules' will was. "If we can subdue him, we can go to the Martian hunter. He is one of the strongest telepaths in the universe. Let's see if he has a way. If it doesn't work, I can try to use my power of will to see if I can change reality." Groot's telepathic ability was more about control. When he was under control, he was a normal person. When he was no longer under control, he would still go crazy. The Martian hunter was the best choice now. Diana nodded silently, and the two returned their attention to the battle. After half an hour of fighting, the Sea King and his wife defeated Hercules with difficulty. Hercules' body was harder than steel, and his recovery ability was top-notch. The Sea King's trident left wounds on his body, but Hercules recovered very quickly. It was impossible to kill him. Relying on his unlimited physical strength, Hercules' last bit of strength was exhausted. The Sea King elbowed him in the face. Hercules' eyes were closed, filled with madness and murderous intent. This warrior who dominated the gods with his strength was finally knocked out due to exhaustion of his physical strength. The Sea King heard the conversation between the two women and happily handed Hercules to them. "Arthur, everything is my fault." The four of them carried Hercules, who weighed tons, back to the island. Dr. Daniel Evans apologized to the Sea King with a guilty look on his face. The four of them did not blame him too much. This person was not a bad person. He was just too focused on his own research and was bewitched by the giant creature. They came back to the place where the seal was broken. Originally, they could put the trident back and reseal it. However, when Hercules came out, he had completely destroyed the barrier between the two worlds, so the trident was useless. The three of them could fight and kill, but when it came to the matter of sealing, it was up to Missy. They looked at Thea together. Thea also did her research. The other side was equivalent to a different world the size of a town. Now that all the prisoners had been killed by them, there was nothing on the other side. It did not matter whether they sealed it or not. However, Thea still used her knowledge to redraw the sealing enchantment on the spot. Because the giant creature had been there for thousands of years, the air on the other side was filled with madness and evil. If they did not seal it, there would be a few more villains if those auras entered this world. The result of her rich theoretical knowledge was that she was familiar with it. It was easier than sealing the hole in Nandarbat. Using the original specifications of Atlantis, Thea quickly resealed the passage. Chapter 453. From now on, This island will be a forbidden area, and your trident will still be the key to unseal it. Under the watchful eyes of a few outsiders, Sia easily drew countless irregular lines. A purple energy lightly swept across the scene, causing the aura of madness and chaos in the air to immediately stop spreading. Diana and the others were fine, but Jamie Olsen and the other survivors were dazzled. They didn't know what was going on, but they thought it was awesome. As for the forbidden area that she mentioned, they still had lingering fears. No one was going to come to this broken island again, and whether it was forbidden or not had little to do with them. The surrounding sea was affected by their battle. The waves were still turbulent, and there were still countless whirlpools under the water. The warm-hearted Sea King called the survivors to board the ship, and they carried the ship underwater and left the sea. Thea and Diana said goodbye to the two and watched them leave with the survivors. The noisy island quieted down. Only the destruction of various energies and the flow of corrosive blood destroyed the little vegetation on the island. Lady Natasha first put a bunch of sealing spells on Hercules, and then put on a large number of high-tech confinement devices from the Heaven's Eye Society. Amanda could use these things to trap ferocious Wolfrob, so it should be effective against Hercules as well. Under layers of confinement, even if Hercules suddenly woke up, his violent counterattack would not be lethal. Thea first checked Hercules as if he was mentally ill, and then she picked the largest medical cabin and put him in. After scanning for a long time, the result was no use. The human's experience in treating mental illnesses was completely ineffective against him. This guy's brain was not damaged, but there was a problem with his soul. It could not be cured in a hurry, so she needed to go back and slowly think of a way. Thea told Diana to look after him. She still had to deal with the bodies of the giant creatures on the island. The bodies of these guys were extremely evil. If they were thrown to the hands of the Cold Flame Church, they could make at least 100 magic tools. They were all curses, chaos, and confusion. There were too many problems left in the world, so purifying them was the best choice. All the bodies were gathered together, holding a holy sword, and silently adjusting their state. Thea softly chanted the inscription, and the holy sword responded at the same time. A large amount of light gathered at the tip of the sword in an instant. Thea's own mana was rapidly transforming. This light was not the light of the illumination spell that any mage apprentice could cast. It was a spiritual light formed by the will of all living beings. It was the light of wisdom, the light of the soul. Thea had a feeling that if this light continued to upgrade endlessly, its final point might be the light that God said should have light, the first light that represented the entire world. Of course, she was only purifying the corpses of some monsters. There was no need to make such a big deal out of it. Even if her magic power increased by 10 times, it would not be able to reach such a level. Thea's current strength could shake the earth, but in the eyes of those powerful beings, she was not much stronger than a microorganism. She obediently withdrew part of her magic power. The entire island was shrouded in light. Not far from the island, the survivors and the Sea King couple also stopped what they were doing and stopped to watch. Nuclear bomb? Jimmy Olsen took out his camera and snapped 2 pictures. Unfortunately, the lens was filled with white and nothing could be seen. He could only ask Daniel Evans, who was beside him. Although he was a Ph.D. in archaeology, he was still a Ph.D. Jimmy felt that his experience today was similar to that of a movie. The protagonist survived all kinds of hardships, and then the government destroyed all the evidence with a nuclear bomb. It was no wonder that he thought so, because this was the plot of such movies. Evans had been an archaeologist for many years and had more or less come into contact with supernatural things. His Ph.D. title was not just for show. He forced himself to explain with his own worldview. It's definitely not a nuclear bomb. Maybe they want to sink the island to the bottom of the sea, or burn the corpses of those monsters. The Ph.D. immediately deduced 5 or 6 possibilities and said with lingering fear. The rest of the survivors also began to talk. Thea, who was on the island, did not know that she had become the focus of their debate. She only felt that her intention to fight secretly was completely ruined. As she injected her own mana into the holy sword, a huge beam of light was produced on the island. The beam of light with a radius of 1,000 meters shot straight into the sky. The overflowing light was reflected to the entire North Atlantic Ocean. Not to mention the satellites of various countries, Even the nearby Spanish people in Portugal could see it with their naked eyes. The sea moved without wind, and countless fish floated to the surface. They did not eat each other, nor did they fight. They just enjoyed the rare peace. The seabirds were singing happily, and the eagles, who had always been at odds with Thea, also joined in. As the spirit of all things, humans more or less felt that something was wrong. Many people stopped and asked each other if they heard the sound of the Scottish bagpipes in the air. A few ancient temples deep in the mountains rang with the sound of bells, and many devout churches and monasteries vaguely sang a song. The media all over the world was alarmed, and several major religious organizations immediately claimed responsibility for the incident. The spiritual leader of a Central Asian country even spoke on the news channel for 1.5 hours, laying out facts and reasoning just to prove one thing. He was the one who did it. The young lady did not know that she had not finished her work yet, and there were already a bunch of people waiting to take the blame. She only had one feeling at this time. This holy sword was too flashy. Even if her total mana was reduced by 30%, it was still far more than the current generation of mages. Even so, under the premise that she had reduced the power of the holy sword, her current mana was still consumed by more than half. Feeling that the light energy had been accumulated, it was more than enough to purify the bodies. Thea did not see how much force she used, but she held the sword with both hands and pointed the tip of the sword at the center of the pile of bodies. The beam of light was like an iron needle piercing a balloon. With the point of impact as the center, the space spread in all directions. All the places covered by the light energy quickly disintegrated, and the bodies of the giant creatures were like soup splashed on snow, quickly melting in front of her eyes. 2 of the giant creatures had been pretending to be dead, or it was a conditioned reflex, and they even shook their legs. Unfortunately, the melting speed was too fast, and their struggles were meaningless. They were disintegrated one by one, and the beam of light purified the evil in their hearts and bodies. Large masses of pure energy overflowed from these ancient evil objects and dissipated into the air. Thea leaned on the holy sword. She was sensitive to the magic in the air. Although it was still very thin, it was much richer than before. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Diana was not so sensitive. She thought that Thea was injured because of the previous beam of light. Before Thea could answer, a rough voice came from not far away. Daughter of Zeus, your companion is fine, but she has purified those giant creatures. The whole world will benefit, but trouble will come with it. It's hard to say if it's lucky or unlucky. Hercules, whose face was full of stubble, slowly sat up. It could be seen that the restrictions were still in effect, but his originally crazy eyes were still a little turbid, but overall there was a bit of brilliance of wisdom. Chapter 454. You're awake? You recognize me, don't you? Diana was in high spirits and said happily. However, Hercules disappointed her. Because of her sword light, I only temporarily recovered a part of my consciousness. The burden on my soul is too heavy and I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to recover. If I leave this place, I will still be that crazy beast. Diana clenched her fists. Thea and I will heal you, Thea. Only then did she realize that Thea only said one sentence and didn't respond. This was too abnormal. She hurriedly looked back and saw Thea standing there with a slightly distracted gaze. She didn't say anything, as if she didn't see Hercules recover his consciousness at all. Daughter of Zeus, don't disturb her. The giant is the product of the giant in Gaia's evil consciousness. She purified the evil consciousness and Mother Earth, Gaia, is rewarding her. Hercules hadn't spoken for tens of thousands of years, so his words were a little unclear. However, Diana still understood. What Mother Earth, Gaia? She was a little skeptical. This was the original god at the level of Zeus's grandmother. Was she still alive? If Thea could hear Diana's thoughts at this moment, she would definitely reply that Mother Earth was no longer alive in the traditional sense. Thea was also proficient in theology and could even take the exam for a doctorate in theology. As the one who experienced it personally, she immediately realized that she had met Gaia. The other party's manifestation was very strange. It was between existence and non-existence, between existence and non-existence. At least at Thea's level, she couldn't understand the other party's state at all. It wasn't accurate to describe it as Gaia's consciousness. With Thea's narrow vision, she could only think that the other party had merged with the Earth. The manifestation now was more like a subconsciousness. The imagined day trip to the Earth's core, the small movie of the birth of the giant, the big reveal of the ancient myths, none of these were present. The other party's consciousness was very fleeting and mechanical, as if it had completed some kind of setting. It returned a large amount of divine power to Thea, and then disappeared as if it had never been there. Missy couldn't wait to laugh 3 times. Divine power was very valuable, and such pure Earth-type divine power was even more valuable. Thea had originally planned to obtain some from Hercules, and she had even come up with several plans to do so. Now she had no intention of planting anything. This mass of divine power was extremely pure. Not only could it activate Thea's Earth attribute, but it could also activate her own mana cycle. It could even restore her to the state before her mana cycle was split. This was much better than carefully starting from Hercules. Thea was very happy, but she did not immediately absorb it. Previously, the Holy Sword had caused too much of a commotion on this island, so they needed to immediately evacuate. Are you awake? When Thea's consciousness returned to reality, she also discovered Hercules' state. Diana explained to her in a low voice, "Let's go back to my place first. I have more equipment there." Thea directly teleported Diana and Hercules back to the metropolis. As soon as they left the island, Hercules' expression began to distort. His eyes were wide open and his teeth were chattering. "Release part of your consciousness, I will knock you out." Hercules, who was in pain, nodded slightly. Thea used her strongest spiritual attack and released a spiritual storm in his spiritual world. The strong man did not even make a sound and directly fainted. Thea did not have time to talk to Diana. She immediately checked. Using a hole that Hercules had specially opened, she extended her spiritual power in, trying to find the real cause of his madness. After searching for 3 minutes, Thea's forehead was sweating. The spiritual world of Hercules was too wide. Countless images of people filled it. There were praises, insults, love, and hatred. There were also projections of many legendary divine objects in his spiritual world, such as the golden apple and the golden fleece. Of course, there were also powerful enemies that he had killed. Thea's spiritual power saw the 9-headed Hydra. Its scarlet eyes peeped at her through Hercules' spiritual world from an unknown timeline. Thea snorted. It was just a stupid snake. She was no longer the naive person she used to be. She was not afraid when it was alive. Why would she be afraid when it was dead for so many years? She searched for a full 10 minutes. The spiritual world of Hercules was as vast as the sea. With her current spiritual power, it would be very difficult to search. Her spiritual power would increase exponentially if she turned into a hero spirit. However, the Holy Sword had released such an earth-shattering attack and needed to rest. It could not provide her with enough energy to turn into a hero spirit. Thea used the spiritual connection to find the Martian hunter, and told him her intention to ask for help. "You want me, an alien, to save an ancient god on Earth?" The Martian hunter did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, he had been on Earth for many years and had heard many stories about Hercules. In his heart, if he could save Hercules, he would definitely be a great general on the side of justice. He did not say anything and said that he would be there soon. However, Thea and Diana waited and waited. After 4 hours, the 2 women finally saw the Martian hunter who would be there soon. This person had found a mission in the metropolis at the last minute. After that, he had disguised himself and sneaked all the way here. "I say, Uncle Ranjan, you flew here in less than 3 minutes, right? You're too careful." Thea was now familiar with him and said teasingly. The Martian hunter glared at her. "You were the one who did what in the Azores, right? What were you doing there?" Thea bragged about her heroic deeds as if she was showing off her achievements. She was very magnanimous at the moment. Even Gaia recognized her achievements, which meant that she had done a good job. Naturally, the Martian hunter could not find fault with her. Realizing that this was the fault of the human scholar, he could only sigh. He's so strong. When he saw Hercules' height, weight, and muscles as hard as iron lying there, the invisible aura made the Martian hunter feel a little moved. Although the Martian hunter was good at telepathy, his strength was comparable to Superman's. The fact that Hercules could make him feel pressured already showed that Hercules was not ordinary. Thea explained what she had found out about the inquiry. Do you think that the giant creature still has an image in his mind? Yes, you call it the mind. We mages call it the spiritual world, and shamans call it the spiritual world. They're all the same. They're all the inner parts of intelligent creatures. Thea first unified the customary terms of both parties. Then she continued, it's not necessarily just one. I think there are many different kinds of enemies from different periods that are polluting his spiritual world. It's just that he could rely on his iron will to suppress all the evil intentions. However, after tens of thousands of years of corrosion, his willpower has been disintegrated, and the evil intentions have jumped out to pollute his mind. The Martian hunter thought about it after listening. Some things were different from his worldview, but the general direction was similar. He did not dwell on it too much and began to examine it carefully. Chapter 455. Although Thea had obtained many techniques and methods to use the power of the mind from the Martian hunter, she mostly used her mental power to control it, which consumed her body. The Martian hunter, on the other hand, was different. This was his natural ability, just like Thea's order balance and the Sea King's control of aquatic animals. His telepathy consumed very little energy. In terms of numbers, he was much stronger than the current Thea. Even if he was not as good as the hero spirit, the difference was not big. With his natural ability and low energy consumption, his search was more efficient and faster than Thea's. There are indeed many tainted bodies of consciousness affecting his mind. What do you want to do? Uncle Ranjan, can you resolve it with your ability? It's difficult. I can try if there are only a few of them, but there are too many tainted things in his mind. Thea leaned against the wall and began to think. The other party was not her, so it was impossible for him to use the hero spirit to get rid of the impurities and preserve the essence. It was impossible for him to use any simple method. I'll do it with you. We'll use our own methods to get rid of as many tainted bodies of consciousness as possible before we can't hold on any longer. There was no good way. It was a little stupid, but the Martian hunter did not have any good ideas either. Let's do it. The Martian hunter's consciousness entered first, and Thea followed behind him. The two of them split up to search for the tainted bodies of consciousness. Thea soon saw a three-headed hellhound that looked like it had been skinned. It was not difficult to defeat this thing in the spiritual world, but it was much more troublesome to completely destroy it. Thea shot the monster dead 3 times in a row, but it just shook its head and stood up again. The tainted bodies of consciousness were too closely connected to Hercules' main body. Every time it died, it consumed Hercules' consciousness. Simply killing it was meaningless, and there was even a tendency for it to worsen. Thea looked at her abundant willpower and took out 1/10 of it. A bright white light shot out from the spiritual body's finger and flew straight into the hellhound's body. The Cerberus body turned sluggish in an instant, and with a series of pixelated ripples, the Cerberus collapsed completely, reverting back to the consciousness of Hercules. Staunch, tenacious, brave, this small consciousness had almost all the qualities that a warrior could have. In a flash of light, it turned into a Hercules who had shrunk countless times. He held a sharp axe in his hand, nodded at Sia to express his gratitude, and ran to the other side. It seemed that there was a natural connection between the consciousness and the contaminated consciousness. Thea followed closely and soon found another contaminated body. The one holding the axe was fighting with the contaminated body. Looking at the power of will in her hand, Thea saw that it had consumed almost half of the power of will. Without any hesitation, she sent the power of will into the polluted body. Just like the previous scene, a body of consciousness with 2 swords in its hands jumped out again. Very good. This was purification, turning the enemy into one of their own. With one less enemy, their own side would gain one. This was a battle in the spiritual world. If it was in the real world, the other side would have gone crazy. Not caring about the consumption of power of will, Thea directly transformed 18 contaminated bodies, leaving some power of will in case of an emergency. She signaled for the others to move freely. She had already discovered that these positive bodies were different from their external spiritual power. They could completely kill the contaminated bodies. Perhaps this was the common saying, whoever started the trouble should end it. She hurriedly ran back to the entrance. Her spiritual power and power of will were almost depleted. She had to retreat. Halfway through, she saw the Martian hunter showing off his power. In the spiritual world, the Martian hunter showed his true form. He had green skin, a purple cloak, and scarlet eyes. If one only looked at his appearance, this guy had the temperament of a villain. His spiritual body was more aggressive than Thea's. Realizing that conventional methods could not kill the opponent, he chose a new method. In this spiritual world, he used his powerful talent and understanding to forcefully dig out a deeper spiritual space. Those contaminated bodies of consciousness were all beaten half to death and then thrown in. It would be best if they could survive on their own, but if they couldn't, it could be considered a temporary quarantine. This method was not bad. Sia's eyes lit up. Sure enough, each of them had their own tricks up their sleeves. The Martian hunter was indeed a master of telepathy. Hercules was not an ordinary person. He was a god with a will as strong as iron. Not many people had the ability to punch a hole in his indomitable spirit. The battle between the wills was like a tug of war. If one side was weak, the other side would naturally rise. As the contaminated consciousness kept being locked up, Hercules' main bodies will finally responded. More positive bodies joined the battle. Thea, who had originally wanted to retreat, also helped to fight. After half an hour, the Martian hunter, who had the support of his talent, could not stand it anymore. There were too many enemies. He firmly sealed the deep spiritual space and asked Thea to retreat. "How are you? Are you okay?" Diana, who could not help at all, asked nervously when she saw that the two of them were a little tired. "It's better than expected. It's all thanks to Uncle Ranjan." Thea did not take the credit. The help provided by the other party was much greater than she had expected. The Martian hunter was really exhausted. His psychic ability was strong, but his recovery was not fast. Unlike Thea, who could rely on fear and emotions and could recover easily, he needed time to slowly recover. "Thank you for your help." Hercules, who was in a coma, had already woken up. At this time, his consciousness could be said to have suppressed the negative emotions. If he wanted to fully recover, he would need a few more treatments. If he was not stimulated, normal communication was no problem. The few of them briefly introduced each other. Hercules was very polite when he was normal, especially when he saw that the three people in front of him were not weak. Diana was not to be mentioned. The daughter of Zeus was also not bad. Thea was also a strong person in his eyes. If she was in his era, she would be a demigod hero. The Martian hunter was the one who attracted his attention. Hercules did not know that this guy was afraid of fire. In his eyes, the Martian hunter was simply impeccable. Whether it was the strength of the body or the power of the soul, they were perfect to the extreme. Was this the current Earthling? "What do you mean by luck and misfortune?" Diana asked hurriedly when she saw that he had regained consciousness. Previously on the island, they did not talk about it in detail. Diana had long wanted to ask. Hearing this, Thea and the Martian hunter turned their attention. Thea was busy purifying and did not know that they had a short conversation before. "The giant's will has returned to Gaia. The world's barrier has become thin. This means the gods are about to return." Chapter 456. The Return of the Gods. The three of them were a little horrified. The Martian hunter was an alien, and he could only say that he knew about Earth's mythology. Most of the so-called knowledge here was the knowledge that Diana had popularized to him. Thea could perceive that the magic content in the air was increasing. Although it was only a flash in the pan for the long existence of Earth, it was distributed among 6 billion people. She also associated it with the emergence of mutants in the next few years. She didn't believe that it had nothing to do with this matter. Diana was only left with shock. It was a surprise to occasionally see a brother, but if there were hundreds of them, she would go crazy. Although she had been in human society for many years, with the broadening of her vision and the change of perspective, she was no longer very convinced that the idea that Ares was behind the human wars. But deep-rooted thinking was not so easy to change. She was 30% expectant of her brothers and sisters, 60% fearful of them, and there was still a feeling that she couldn't explain. Haha. But you don't have to worry. Not all of them are interested in this world. It takes time to wake up from the kingdom of God and accumulate strength to come here. The lion-like man laughed heartily, suppressing the malice in his body. He now felt unusually relaxed and couldn't help but say a few more words to them. He seemed to have thought of something. and his expression became a little more serious. But a long time ago, there was a prophecy that the eldest son of Zeus and Hera would step on the corpse of his brother to ascend to the throne of the Father God. This prophecy corresponds to all the children of Zeus. Amazon girl, you are also in the prophecy, so you have to be careful. After that, Hercules laughed self-deprecatingly. Zeus, that coward who likes to play tricks, his father Kronos overthrew his grandfather, and he overthrew Kronos. Now it's his turn to be overthrown. Haha. Hercules had no respect for his father. It was as if he was talking about an unimportant passerby. But it was not his fault. Zeus, the main god, was too philanthropic. He had created a huge pantheon by himself. 80% of the heroes, demigods, and true gods in Greek mythology were related to him. This big boss was too good at creating. Troubled times, Thea had to sigh. Compared to the new gods in the Apocalypse Star, the ones who were about to jump out now were the old gods. They could barely be regarded as minor problems. Their divine power was weak, their abilities were easily restrained, they had almost no power of faith, and their personalities were particularly strange. Now was not the ancient times. As long as they did not jump out at the critical moment, the Earth's current power was not afraid of them. The only thing to worry about was the firstborn. This was Diana's strongest opponent in the original spacetime. Thea estimated that this firstborn, who even Zeus was afraid of, was stronger than Diana and Hercules. He was the first child of Zeus and Diana. Unlike Diana and Hercules, who were only demigods, he was born as the most powerful god. But as Hercules said, there was still some time. The so-called arrival of the gods sounded scary, but in fact it was just a few gods who did not give up trying to make their presence known. Hercules wasn't prepared to explain too much. Perhaps it was his personality that didn't like to talk too much. He didn't waste any time talking nonsense with them. He lay down on the ground, wrapped himself in a tattered animal skin, and fell asleep. He did not treat himself as an outsider and directly made a bed on the floor of Thea's laboratory. The three of them could only walk out. What is the level of the gods that he mentioned? Will they harm the Earth? The Martian hunter asked the two girls in a low voice. Diana looked at Thea and saw that she had no intention of explaining. She could only answer herself. According to what I know, their fighting power will not surpass Hercules. If they harm the Earth, then it's hard to say. The gods' thinking is different from ours. The Martian hunter did not comment. He only told the two to be careful and left alone. In the next few days, Diana did not return to London. She stayed in the metropolis. On the one hand, she wanted to talk more with Hercules and learn more about the inside story. On the other hand, she was afraid that he would suddenly attack and Thea would not be able to handle it alone. Thea was also afraid that something would happen to Hercules, and that it would affect his fighting power. She did not directly absorb the divinity of Gaia. Instead, she was going to wait for him to get better. Unlike Diana, who could slack off in her work, she had disappeared for a month. She had a lot of work to do. In the past, she could send her doppelgangers to attend some boring banquets and meetings. Now that her power had increased, but her doppelgangers were completely gone, she could only do it herself. In a certain banquet hall. Haha! The young lady was wearing a sapphire blue dress and silver high heels. She covered her mouth and chatted with several female counselors in a very ladylike manner. In the banquet over the past few days, the focus of the discussion had been the aurora on the Azores. The few of them talked a lot, saying all kinds of things. Aliens were attacking the Earth, the government's new weapons, and some kind of treasure had appeared. There were all kinds of theories. Even Sia, the initiator of all this, felt that there was a hole in their heads. She felt that someone was watching her. She turned around slightly and saw the dark-skinned Amanda standing not far away. She was giving her a look. She smiled and said goodbye to the few idle people. Then she walked toward Amanda. Both of them were smiling. When they reached a place where no one was around, Thea put away her dignified manner. "Big sister, what's the matter?" Amanda looked at her with a half-smile. Thea's skin was as thick as a city wall. She was not moved at all. "You're the one behind the Azores incident, right?" "Yes. Ever since the shocking light beam of the Holy Sword appeared, Thea did not plan to hide it. The battle had lasted for more than half an hour. Not to mention the reporters at the scene, the satellites of various countries would have captured some footage. As her strength increased, there were fewer things she was afraid of. One of my scientists was doing an experiment at the time. Because of your righteous act, he became like this. Amanda handed Thea a tablet as she spoke. On it was a real-time feed. However, Thea did not see anything strange after looking at it for a long time. A high-end laboratory? What was she supposed to see in the dark? Knowing that she didn't understand what she meant, Amanda was shocked when she first learned the truth. In layman's terms, he's invisible, but according to our equipment, he's still in this room. His body has mutated and now he can absorb all light. If I'm not mistaken, the main culprit is your light beam. How is that possible? Nothing is impossible. This Dr. Wright loves to study all kinds of light. Cosmic rays. When you were messing with the light beam that attracted the attention of the world, he seemed to have caught a trace of. Amanda said, a little depressed. Chapter 457. Despite Avatar's convincing explanation, Thea was still in disbelief. What a joke. That was the light of purification from the sword of victory and oath, the supreme holy sword of Celtic mythology. Now you're telling me that a human scientist captured a ray of light through technological means? This was not light in the traditional sense. This was the light of wisdom, the light of desire. What kind of technology could capture this kind of light? She had planned to fool Avatar, but now Thea's curiosity was piqued. She had to see this rare thing. Avatar wanted to use her knowledge to heal her subordinates, while Thea wanted to see this strange scientist. The two hit it off and soon arrived at the headquarters of the Heaven's Eye Society. Other than Laura Michaels, the only other person who came to greet them was a black man, Dr. Mist. This man was covered in light green magic circles and wore a red cape. He looked serious and unsmiling, standing there like a statue. Even Avatar, who was his direct superior, did not look at him, let alone an outsider like Thea. Thea found it funny that he was pretending to be an expert. The man's ability to reflect all spells was a joke to her. He would not be able to withstand any spell that was slightly more powerful. However, since he was a member of the Heaven's Eye Society, Thea was in no position to comment. This is the place. Laura led them to a room. When she pushed the door open, the room was even darker. Thea guessed that the man was being assimilated faster for some reason. Save me. This thing is eating me. A middle-aged man's voice came from the room. However, his voice was very faint, as if he was talking through a blanket. Thea quickly left the place. Avatar and the others did not know what she was going to do, but they quickly followed her. After walking for a few hundred meters, Thea stopped. She looked into the distance and heaved a sigh of relief. What's wrong? Is it going to explode? Avatar could not help but think. Thea was stunned for a moment before she realized that they had misunderstood her. She found it a little funny. It's not an explosion. I don't know how he did it, but I do have something to do with your doctor's condition. If I get too close to him, his assimilation speed will start to accelerate until he becomes a beam of light. No one can help him. He can only save himself. Have him design a costume that produces light so that he can absorb it. After that, it would be best if he stayed in a dark room. What should we do now? Amanda asked. Use your strongest searchlight on him. When the light energy in his body accumulates to a certain level, his body will regain its balance. Don't worry, it's not a big deal. I'll be leaving first, Thea said casually. On the way back, she felt that it was very strange. This unlucky guy who had absorbed the light from the holy sword was probably Dr. Light. Thea was really curious as to how the other party was able to collect such extraordinary light. Was this also a sign of the coming of the great era that Hercules had mentioned? Realizing that her purification had caused a lot of chain reactions, Thea felt that the incident with the Heaven's Eye Society was not a coincidence. Perhaps something had happened to other people in other places that she did not notice. She sat in her office and ordered the artificial intelligence. Organize all the strange things that have happened in the past few days. Gideon searched quickly. Various hospital archives, traffic reports, forum news, and gossip were quickly recorded. Thea browsed quickly. A homeless man died in a high-end conference center? Isn't this? Injured people in a zoo, 3 dead and 7 injured? This doesn't seem to be a big deal. As she browsed quickly, a piece of news finally caught her attention. 3 days ago, 2 hours after Thea released the light beam, meteorologists believed that the ocean currents in the North Atlantic Ocean were disturbed. The originally calm sea surface was affected and kept accumulating energy. When this energy moved to the east coast of the United States, it turned into a downpour and a thunderstorm hit the metropolis. A very famous radio host, Leslie Wales, stubbornly took a helicopter to do a live broadcast on that day. The strong storm destroyed the helicopter. At the critical moment, Superman stepped forward and saved the woman. Unfortunately, she was really unlucky. After Superman pulled her out of the helicopter and landed on the ground, a bolt of lightning struck Superman. Superman reacted quickly and pushed her away in 1/10 of a second. However, he did not expect that there was a wire next to their feet. The lightning in the sky passed through the wire and struck the broadcaster. Student Clark, who was struck by lightning, was fine. He did not vomit blood nor did he transmigrate. However, Leslie Wales, who was not far away, did not have such a physique. She was electrocuted on the spot and died not long after being sent to the hospital. Thea shook her head and smiled bitterly. She was really a butterfly this time. When she flapped her wings in the Azores, there was a thunderstorm in the United States. Based on her intuition, Thea felt that the woman was not dead. There was no breath at that time. It was just the process of her body readjusting. Dr. Light was closely watched by the Sky Eye Society, so it was difficult for her to make a move. However, this woman was not a problem. Her ability was very similar to the Electric Man from Marvel Next Door. She could control and absorb electricity. With more effort, she would be a useful subordinate. She picked up the phone and ordered Death Knell to move the woman's corpse out. Half an hour later, Thea saw her target. She had to admit that it was a bit tragic. Her whole body was carbonized. Her clothes hung on her body in pieces and her hair was all white. The person who dealt with the corpse did not pay much attention and only roughly wiped it. She could barely tell that it was a woman from the appearance. Is there something special about this person? But she seems to be completely dead. I've seen her program before. It's not bad. It's a pity. Death Knell leaned on the table and asked. Not to mention that he had seen it, Thea had also seen the program hosted by this lady. In order to cater to the market and attract attention, she scolded Superman every day. Many people such as Thea had secretly watched it. She suspected that Batman had also watched it. Lex Luthor also watched it on time every day. It was not easy for ordinary citizens to count, but she had a place in the hearts of superheroes and villains. From the big picture, this woman was vulgar and unscrupulous. In order to curry favor, she could be said to be unscrupulous. She was definitely not a good person in the traditional sense. In fact, thinking about it carefully, one could also see her helplessness. She came to a place like the metropolis alone to make money and become famous. If she did not have proof and a resume, who would hire her? After several considerations, she chose to be a streamer. The next step was to choose a target. This program had to have a selling point, right? This woman's characteristic was that she was good at sarcastic. Who was she sarcastic about? Sarcastic about Thea? Sarcastic about Luthor? Half an hour later, she was put in a sack and thrown into the river. She did not dare to scold these people in power. At this time, Superman, who was also very famous and would not take revenge on her, entered her sight. Once the program was broadcast, it was indeed well received. Miss Wales seemed to have found a golden finger. Following that, she could not stop scolding Superman until today. Chapter 458. Thea's supervision allowed her to see inside her body. As a biological symbol, her blood circulation had been completely destroyed by the raging electric current. All her organs were basically carbonized, and only her heart and lungs were still beating slightly. This was the result of the residual electric current assimilating with her body. However, this process was extremely slow. In theory, she would be able to come back to life in 17 or 18 years. Of course, this was under the premise that her body had not been buried or destroyed by someone. Taking into account the fact that she was thrown into the morgue alone without any attachments, it was obvious that she would not have survived if she had followed the original path. This woman was similar to Poison Ivy. Both of them had external objects entering their bodies, causing irreversible changes in their life forms. The only difference was that Poison Ivy's life force was too strong, while this woman's life force was too weak. Connect her to the nutrient solution, max output. Thea signaled death knell. 3 thick needles were inserted into her severely necrotic skin, and various nutrients were injected into her almost dried-up body. 10 minutes later, Thea saw that her heart was wrapped in a layer of electric current, and it began to beat slowly. Does she have any abilities that are worth your attention? Death knell asked thoughtfully. She can control and absorb electric current. When the electric current in her body reaches a certain level, her explosive power and speed will increase by a large margin. She can shoot out electric shock waves, and she can move between charged objects at high speed. Thea roughly explained a few points that she had thought of in a short period of time. Oh, that sounds good. But she must have some weaknesses, right? Of course. After gaining power in a short period of time, her mentality will definitely be unstable. Another is that she is extremely afraid of water. She can easily wipe out a fully armed American army, but she can also be defeated by a group of kindergartners with water guns. Seeing that Death Knell's expression was a little ugly, Thea hurriedly changed her words. Kindergartners are a little exaggerated, but the fire brigade can definitely defeat her. Then you still intend to recruit her? Thea did not answer immediately. The electric lady was the kind of person who had both advantages and disadvantages. Even without a great scientist, those who had studied for a few years would know how to deal with her. However, the other party's advantages could not be ignored. Now, the densely packed electrical equipment in the city would provide her with a huge amount of energy. Her mobility and destructive power were unparalleled. Thea thought for a moment. She'll be a great assistant if she's trained well. Oh right, she'll probably need to be trained for a few days. I can't stay here for too long. I'll leave the ring with you and return it to her when her arrogance has worn off, Thea said as she handed Death Knell an imitation yellow light ring. As evening came, the electricity lady's carbonized body continued to crack. Her charred skin fell to the ground and shattered. The newly exposed skin was almost transparent. The place where the blood vessel should have been was now replaced by electricity. Where am I? The electric lady sat up in a daze. First, she clenched her fists and looked at the electric current passing through her palms. Then she looked around in shock. In the distance, there were dozens of fully armed burly men standing upright. They were all equipped with various instruments that he did not understand. A certain organization's base. This was her first thought. Had she become an experimental subject and been modified in various ways? It was no wonder that she thought so. American movies were full of such plots. It was hard for her to not go astray. Miss Leslie Wales, do you still remember what happened before? I saved you. Otherwise, you would be lying in the morgue right now. Thea saw that her eyes were a little unfocused. However, she did not scream like a lunatic. Thea felt that this was good news. You are? The electric lady's gaze automatically skipped over Death Knell, who was 2 meters tall and had a body like a bear. This was not because Death Knell was weak. In the original timeline, he was known as the greatest enemy of the young Titans. Death Knell, who was the nemesis of the brats, was no joke. Carrying 2 swords on his back and looking fierce if it was in the past, he would have scared the former streamer out of her wits. However, today, the electric lady's gaze was still attracted by Thea. Unlike Diana's classic martial style, Thea had entered the middle stage of the demigod realm. Her appearance was more in line with modern aesthetics. Coupled with her rich knowledge, her overall temperament was raised by another level. Even as a female, it was rare for her to have feelings of jealousy. It was just that Thea would usually use magic to change some details in public so that her appearance would not be so stunning. Now that she was in her own base, she did not need to use magic to hide her appearance. What she showed was her original appearance. You know me, right? There were some differences in the details, but the overall appearance was the same. The electric lady's body had been modified. Her vision and hearing had improved greatly. She asked with uncertainty, "You are that billionaire? Are you the one who caught me here? None of you rich people are good people." Her tone was normal at first, but no one knew what she was thinking. As she spoke, she became so angry that her voice became shrill. The lights in the base flickered because of her. What should I do? She seems to hate the rich. Death Knell watched the show happily. He was not worried that she would go on a rampage and kill him. Now that his agility and strength had surpassed the limits of a human, he was not afraid of any metahumans. Moreover, this was a person who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth just because she had some abilities. Thea did not comment. The electric lady did hate the rich, but it was more of an electric current that affected her emotions. She could not control herself. I am a god. The electric lady became angrier the more she thought about it. What little rationality she had left was replaced by a crazy electric current. Her eyes rolled back and she floated in the air. The electric current in the base was crazily converging on her body. A few guards seemed to want to rush in, but they were stopped by Death Knell. Thea was speechless. This guy was different from Dr. Light. Dr. Light was a middle-aged man with a wife and children. He had a happy family and a good income. He was a middle-class person. This broadcasting lady was not doing well. She had been looked down upon by all kinds of people in her life. If she was not taught well, she would definitely become a villain. Blue light flickered between Thea's fingers. Water shield technique. A layer of aqua blue film covered her body. Amidst the violent electric sparks, the former broadcasting lady could no longer maintain her elegant posture. She fell to the ground like a salted fish. Her whole body was trembling. She had been short-circuited. Why can't you listen to me? I told you I'm here to help you. Think about your previous experience. If it wasn't for me, you would have been dead. Thea squatted beside her and said slowly. The electric lady was not sure if she was speaking the truth, but she felt weak all over. It was true. The raging electric current disappeared, and her cautious personality appeared again. She had never seen magic before. She thought that Thea had done something to her body. That was how it was portrayed in movies. Thinking that she had become a fish on the chopping board, she became completely obedient. She showed a fawning expression and waited for Thea to continue. Chapter 459. Good girl, stand up on your own. Don't make me do it myself. Thea was taller than the lightning lady. She stroked her hair as if she was petting a cat. The lightning lady's body was numb. She had already forgotten that she was shouting that she was a god a minute ago. She stood up trembling like a quail. Thea waved her right hand and used a simple water extraction spell to suck away all the remaining water on the lightning lady's body. Seeing such an unnatural scene up close, Miss Leslie Wales did not dare to act rashly even though the electric current in her body was running again. Very well, control your temper. What I want to say is that you're not a god. You're just a lucky guy. If it weren't for my help, you'd still be in the morgue. Me? Oh. As her mind cleared, she finally recalled the electric shock. Superman didn't save me? Thea laughed. This was the typical attitude of the citizens of the metropolis. They usually scolded Superman loudly, but when something happened, they felt that Superman should save them. How much did they pay him to be a nanny? It could be said that these people were spoiled by superheroes. Unfortunately, Superman didn't save you. Of course, his ability doesn't include healing. At that time, you were already in a state of suspended animation. He didn't notice. The lightning lady looked at the surroundings. It was creepy no matter how she looked at it. She asked hesitantly, "Can I go now?" Thea laughed. "What do you think?" The lightning lady's emotions rose again. She gathered a large amount of electric current between her hands again. "You can't stop me." Thea looked at her watch. She still had to eat with Diana later. She really didn't have time to waste with her. She signaled Poison Ivy, who had just walked over, to deal with her. She walked out herself. "Don't go." A dazzling electric light struck Thea's back. This kind of attack was scattered and messy. Thea didn't look back. She directly set up a magic barrier behind her. It blocked the electric light without any ripples. The aqua blue teleportation door opened. She stepped through it and left the underground base. Where did she go? Thanks to the huge amount of information in the current society, a living person just disappeared right in front of her eyes. She had only seen such a bizarre thing in novels. Could it be that the portal just now was? No one answered her question. A huge plant emerged from the floor and wrapped her up in 3 layers. "Poison Ivy, you broke my floor again," Death Knell said speechlessly. Poison Ivy, who was walking over from afar, shrugged her shoulders and didn't seem to care at all. "Is this woman our new companion? What a bad temper. I'll leave it to you. I still have things to do." Death Knell threw a ring to Poison Ivy. Thea left it behind. Give it to her when the time is right. Seeing how Death Knell ignored her and walked away, leaving behind a woman with green skin and red hair, Electric Lady felt that she was being looked down upon. Don't go. She tried to release the electricity around her to burn this strange plant that was binding her. However, she miscalculated. Poison Ivy's plant wasn't from Earth but from a peace-loving, high-tech planet. It didn't have any special abilities other than absorbing electricity. It could absorb anything that was related to electricity. Poison Ivy didn't intend to use it in battle, and only kept it for fun out of curiosity. Now that it had come in handy, even she was surprised. Let me go. Let me go if you dare. No matter how hard Electric Lady released the electricity, the plant in front of her looked half dead, as if it would turn into charcoal in the next moment. However, after 10 minutes, Electric Lady's continuous discharge was a heavy burden on her body. She didn't know how to communicate with plants, but she could observe that the plant in front of her had undergone many subtle and indescribable changes. Poison Ivy was overjoyed. The joy of the plant was her joy. She was still cheering for Electric Lady. Continue, don't stop. Thea left Electric Lady's violent temper to Poison Ivy's slow-witted temper. She was prepared to teach her a lesson. She shouldn't always think that the heavens were number one and she was number two. The prosperity of the metropolis had returned to normal. The citizens on the streets and alleys resumed their daily lives. Thea left the underground base and was currently shopping crazily with Diana in a nearby store. Both of them were extremely tall. With their height and good figure, they could always wear long skirts as short skirts. Even though many of the clothes looked good, they couldn't fit the two of them. This had always been their problem. Of course, the young lady could call 100 assistants to buy clothes for her. But Diana enjoyed the pleasure of shopping, so she followed them out without a care. Long-sleeved ladies' blouse, round-collared autumn and winter long-sleeved wool coat, casual professional trousers, spaghetti straps, miniskirts, long boots, and various high heels. They didn't care if it was useful or not. Both of them bought a huge bag. You're out shopping too? What a coincidence, what a coincidence. The two of them bought a huge pile of clothes. The clothing store owner personally escorted them out of the store. They bumped into Clark Kent and Louise Lane. Diana habitually greeted them. The two of them didn't expect to bump into each other on the streets. After all, no one had supervision and superhearing 24/7. Although Thea had changed slightly, her overall appearance hadn't changed. Those who had seen her before could still recognize her. On the surface, she and Clark knew each other, but they weren't close. However, Diana shouldn't know Clark. Louise Lane turned her head to look at her boyfriend in confusion. Then she looked at the extraordinarily handsome Diana. Her mind was filled with questions. I'll explain later. Bro Superman smiled sheepishly. Seeing that Thea and Louise were about to leave, he quickly stopped them. Thank you for saving Jimmy. It's my treat. Let's have dinner together? Louise seemed to have thought of something but didn't interrupt. The two girls looked at each other. They hadn't eaten dinner yet. Let's have a big meal together. Clark Kent wasn't a poor man. His family owned a farm, so he didn't need to hire anyone. He alone could take care of 10,000 people. In the metropolis, the Daily Planet wasn't a street tabloid. By reporting first-hand information about many superhumans, Clark received more bonuses than the editor-in-chief. He held a very high position in the hearts of the media workers. Otherwise, the scene of Luther urging him to shake hands with Bruce wouldn't have appeared in the movie Dawn of Justice. Aside from his identity as a hero, not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry was qualified to shake hands with a billionaire. There were even rumors that this year's Pulitzer Prize would be awarded to him. Louise Lane was a stealthy rich woman. Because of her father's fame, the merchants didn't dare to take her money for fear of being captured by her father for human experiments. Plus, after working at the Daily Planet for so many years, she spent little and earned a lot. It was hard for her not to be rich. Chapter 460. They found a high-end restaurant and chatted as they ate. Were you the ones who saved Jimmy? Are you all superheroes? Did you know him before? The him Louise was referring to was naturally Clark. Her IQ wasn't low, and being a reporter was a profession with strong analytical abilities. Superman had specifically mentioned Jimmy's incident, and connecting all the clues together, It wasn't difficult to discover the truth. Louise knew Superman's true identity, but she didn't expect that there would be a superhero among the people she knew. Furthermore, he was a billionaire. Her only question was whether both women were heroes or if one of them was. Thea and Diana looked at each other and nodded. Louise could be said to be the closest ordinary person to a superhero. Her father and her boyfriend knew about Thea's true abilities, so it was not unacceptable for them to tell her. Oh, Louise suddenly realized. So you really saved Jimmy? Who's Jimmy? Diana did not know who Jimmy was. Thea saw that the restaurant was quiet and no one was paying attention to her. She reached out and tapped the table lightly. With a water mirror image, Jimmy Olsen's image was reflected. Diana looked at the image and felt that it was familiar. Oh, it's him. He's quite a brave person. Thea pursed her lips. This was called being dumb, okay? This was not bravery at all. Louise was completely convinced when she saw this. She curiously tapped her finger on the water mirror. Her finger was clean and there was nothing there. Seeing that they were open about it, Superman sighed in relief. What were the enemies you encountered on the island? Jimmy took a lot of pictures. Were they aliens? These things had been explained several times, and Sia was very familiar with it. She told him everything from the beginning to the end. Superman sometimes frowned and sometimes pursed his lips. When he heard that the enemies were all wiped out and that the Justice faction had one more Hercules, he felt much more relaxed. What Thea said had little impact on Superman. Whether it was gods or evil, it was the same to him. However, these things were a little unsettling to Louise. The Greek gods, the will of the world, and the Atlanteans were all contrary to her original worldview, especially when she found out that Diana was the daughter of the King of Gods, and that there was another well-known god who was currently recuperating in Metropolis. She was completely at a loss for words. Saint Hercules. Superman was a little excited when he heard these names. Unlike the Martian Manhunter who had lived for hundreds of years, Superman was still a young man according to the age of the Kryptonians. It was inevitable for him to be competitive, but he also knew that it was not the right time to suggest a fight, so he suppressed the urge. Now that they had a preliminary understanding of each other, it was easy to chat. Thea was mainly concerned about Superman's recent encounters. Superman was a little puzzled when he mentioned that some unknown forces had been attacking him with missiles recently. Thea pretended to be puzzled, but she knew that Luthor had started to collect Superman's genes to make clones. To clone someone like Superman, whose genes were perfect, required a lot of preparatory work. Even with the help of the Kryptonians who had surrendered, Luthor's workload was so heavy and cumbersome that it made him lose a lot of hair. It should be known that Earth's current technological level could only clone some animals. Even someone like Sia, who had scoured space for scientific and technological knowledge, could only clone ordinary people. Mr. Luthor was too careless. He directly went for the most difficult one and chose the hell difficulty as the starting point. Sia did not know what to say, but this person actually succeeded. It was truly shocking. As for the missiles that attacked Superman, Poison Ivy controlled the plants and collected some samples without anyone noticing. Thea only took a few glances to know that Luthor was the one behind it. He had installed a lot of nanomachines on the missile warhead, coupled with invisible kryptonite needles. He was using these things to silently collect Superman's cells. At present, only Thea and Luthor had the technology to use miniaturized equipment and knew how to use kryptonite. Since it wasn't Thea who did it, it went without saying who was behind it. When Thea saw the nanomachines picked up by Poison Ivy, she realized that Luthor had mastered the atomization knowledge she revealed on the spaceship. This man was really amazing. Although he didn't understand a lot of things at the time, he remembered everything Thea said on the spaceship and went home to study it. Just by looking at the nanomachines he made, she knew that he had put in a lot of effort. The only good news was Luthor's personality. He was arrogant, proud, and wanted everyone to look at him. This personality determined that he wouldn't study the atomic suit. He wanted to make an indomitable robot and beat Superman to the ground. He wouldn't become invisible to a microscope to deal with Superman. The Atomic Man's philosophy and personality were too different from his. If one day he really became invisible and unknown, he would rather die. The four of them chatted and time passed quickly. When they said goodbye to each other, Diana hesitated for a moment and said, "I want to fight with you." Diana was unusually serious when she spoke. Thea immediately realized that she had been holding this sentence in her heart for a long time, but she just couldn't find the opportunity to say it. She believed in Diana's strength and didn't stop her. Instead, she quietly waited for Superman's response. Louise also realized the seriousness of the atmosphere. In her impression, Superman was synonymous with invincibility. She was a little excited that someone was going to challenge him today. The right to choose fell into Superman's hands. According to his heart, he wanted to fight to his heart's content, but there were too few enemies on Earth that were worthy of him fighting. The comfortable environment had eroded the warlike nature of the Kryptonian in his blood. Tonight he first heard the story of their battle with Hercules, and then Diana wanted to fight with him. The passion in his heart finally suppressed all his worries. "Okay, I promise you, but the venue of the battle." "Thea will definitely think of a way," Diana said affirmatively. Ideas flashed through Louise's mind. Space combat was the most environmentally friendly. Although both of them could survive in space, Diana obviously wasn't good at space combat, so this option was directly rejected. If they fought on Earth, Superman could continuously absorb the energy of the yellow sun, which was also unfair to Diana. Plus, the various satellite observations were too troublesome, and they caused a lot of damage to the surface. Thea felt that the two of them could deviate the planet's orbit. For the sake of the 6 billion people, Earth was also rejected. The only option left was to go to outer space. Where to go? It was best to go to a place where there was neither a yellow sun nor a red sun. That? Can I go and watch the battle? I haven't seen him fight with all his strength yet. Louise Ryan gave Thea another difficult problem. Superman stared at her with bright eyes. His meaning was self-evident. Thea scratched her head. There were so many restrictions, and it had to be a planet where an ordinary person like Louise could survive. Chapter 461. After much consideration, they took out the light ring to search and finally found a barren planet. The planet was extremely far away from the star, and there were no signs of life. Even if the two of them deviated the planet's orbit, they were not afraid. Most importantly, there was oxygen on the planet, which was suitable for Louise, an ordinary person who was not afraid of death. After telling them about their discovery, Superman and Diana naturally agreed. They had wanted to fight for a long time, but there were too few suitable battlefields. Go to another planet? How do we get there? Louise's worldview was about to collapse as she hurriedly asked her own question. Don't worry, there's oxygen there, but there's not enough light. It's a little cold. After saying that, Thea gestured for them to go to a more secluded place. The distance was a little far, so the preparation for the teleportation would take a little longer. Calculating the distance, positioning the space, establishing a connecting passage, strengthening the magical power, stabilizing the space turbulence. This kind of long-distance teleportation was much more troublesome than teleporting inside Earth. The lady took out her staff, and a magic circle painted with purple stripes gradually appeared on the ground. Although she did not understand what it was, the highly educated Louise still felt a very complicated geometric beauty from it. Oh right, do you want to change your clothes? It's best if you put on your battle suits and Louise's winter clothes. Thea only thought of this when she was halfway through the magic circle. The three of them nodded in unison. Sia opened 2 portals for them, and they went back to their own homes to change their clothes. She also told them to hurry up and come back before the portals disappeared. After that, she lowered her head and continued to work on the ultra-long-distance teleportation. Louise stepped through the portal uneasily. The first time she encountered this kind of spatial displacement, she was shocked. When she came to her senses, she realized that she was already at home. She touched the tables and chairs in her house. There was no mistaking it. This was her home. She then looked back at the portal that was glowing blue. What kind of ability is this? Do you have this ability? She grabbed Superman, who was looking for her winter clothes, and asked nervously. The honest young man shook his head, indicating that he did not have this ability. Seeing that his girlfriend wanted to ask more, he could only explain. Thea's ability is mysterious. It's different from mine. That tall woman is no match for you, right? Superman didn't dare to answer this question casually. He thought about it seriously and said, I haven't fought her before, so I don't know. She is a very powerful warrior. You won't get hurt, right? It's too dangerous, so let's just forget about it. I don't think I'll lose. This battle is necessary because I'm also a warrior. Superman, who had always been obedient to his girlfriend, said resolutely. Louise understood his personality, so she naturally wouldn't try to persuade him anymore. Hearing her boyfriend say that he wouldn't lose, she felt much more relieved. Her worries disappeared, and the reporter's interest in gossip reappeared. He rubbed his chin and asked, "The relationship between the two women is?" Superman was not that gossipy. According to what he knew about the Kryptonians were born through genetic modification. Relationships between men and women were normal. There was nothing to be surprised about. He quickly changed into his blue clothes and red cloak, then put on a down jacket for Louise. The two of them hurriedly stepped through the portal. The moment he stepped through the portal, his attention was attracted. At this time, Diana had changed out of her flaxen short skirt. Her long hair was let down, and she was wearing her signature Greek-style armor. She carried a sword, a shield, and a silver guardian bracelet on her back. She was quietly waiting for them. The two's fighting spirit reached its peak in an instant, but they were still worried about Earth, so they forced themselves to hold back. Okay, let's go in. This is a deserted planet named Alaru according to the universal name. It's 5 light-years away from Earth and 24 light-years away from Krypton. Thea finished drawing the portal. Unlike the blue portal that could be opened easily on Earth, this portal was purple in color. Just maintaining the portal consumed 20% of her magic power. After checking it carefully and confirming that there were no mistakes, she walked in first. Diana followed closely behind, and Superman comfortingly pulled Louise into the portal as well. The few guys with extraordinary physiques did not feel anything, but the ordinary Louise suffered greatly. It was as if she was thrown into a washing machine. Her body was fine, but her brain felt like it was violently thrown out by centrifugal force. She could not tell if it was dizziness or pain, but she felt like she was floating when she walked. It was similar to being drunk. Fortunately, Thea's magic power was far better than before. She woke up as quickly as she fainted. She shook her head and began to observe the surrounding scenery. This was a dark planet. The clouds were thick, and only a few rays of light shone on the ground between the gaps. There was no vegetation to be seen with the naked eye, and the sky seemed to be covered in sand. The environment was worse than Arabia. The only good news was that there was oxygen here, but it was very thin. She tightened her coat and came to Thea's side. She asked curiously, "There's no sun here? You said it's 5 light-years away from Earth." There's actually a star shining here, but it's very far away. Plus, the star has entered a period of decline." Looking at her nonchalance, Louise could not help but ask, "Aren't you worried about your partner? Will Miss Prince be in danger?" Thea shook her head and did not answer the question. Logically speaking, no one could defeat Superman without kryptonite. However, Diana, who was also wearing a full set of godly equipment and had reached the peak of a demigod, was only one step away from becoming a true god. Thea did not think that she would lose. She was actually looking forward to this battle. Seeing that she had no intention of continuing the conversation, Louise also held back her desire to speak. She only glanced at Thea's short skirt and short sleeves. Thea was dressed like she was shopping. She was a little speechless when she compared herself to her trembling in a down jacket. Thea was secretly amused. If it were anyone else, they would have already gone back. However, this curious woman had no intention of backing down. She was currently staring at the two people in the distance with shining eyes. "Are you good at aerial combat or ground combat?" Superman floated 3 meters above the ground and asked politely. Although Superman opened the battle calmly, Diana still read something new in his words. He was putting psychological pressure on her. She immediately retorted, "Do you prefer to fight with weapons or bare-handed combat? Then let's fight according to what we're good at." Realizing that his opponent did not want to engage in aerial combat with him, Superman was a little disappointed. As for weapons, there was no Superman sword in this world. He did not use any weapons. He flew directly into the air and looked down at Diana. He knew that his opponent was good at defense. This meant that she wanted him to attack first. He did not hold back. His legs suddenly stopped in the air and angled down at a 45-degree angle. He maximized his speed advantage and rushed toward Diana as fast as lightning. Diana did not use her sword and shield directly. After talking with Hercules for a few days, her martial arts had improved greatly. According to Thea's original words, she already had the intention of gaining the upper hand after making the first move. At this time, seeing Superman rushing at her, she was extremely calm. She quickly judged the opponent's several attack points. When the two were about to come into contact, she sidestepped to avoid the first wave of impact. Chapter 462. Then, without waiting for Superman to stop, Diana stretched out her hands and grabbed Superman's red cloak. Using all her strength, her feet, knees, waist, and arms, she spun a few times on the ground at high speed. Then she suddenly released her hands and smashed Superman onto a rock. Boom! With a loud bang, more than half of the mountain that was hit collapsed. Rocks flew everywhere, and a strong vibration was transmitted to the ground. Thea and Louise, who were miles away, could feel the obvious vibration. "Will Clark be okay?" Louise asked nervously. Thea had supervision and was very engrossed in watching. Only then did she realize that Louise couldn't see anything even though she was craning her neck. She used magic to control the ground under her feet to fly into the air, and cast a long-distance vision spell on Louise. After thinking about it, she still had to ensure Louise's safety when the two of them fought until the sky fell and the earth cracked. Louise was watching a battle of this level as an ordinary person. If it were someone else with fewer tricks up her sleeve, they wouldn't be able to protect her. Thea used her light ring to conjure a small house. The two of them sat in the house and watched the fight outside. Thea was very proud of her conjuration. Even Superman's full-force attack couldn't break it. It was more than enough to resist the aftermath of their battle. This level of wrestling couldn't even be considered a warm-up. Only Louise showed a panicked expression, but when she saw Thea's calm face, her nervousness gradually subsided. Superman didn't stay in the mountain for long. He smashed the surrounding rocks with a punch, flew up and fired a heat ray at Diana from afar. The two of them were miles apart, and the heat ray wasn't fast enough to catch them off guard. Diana took 2 steps to the side. The heat ray hit the ground and vaporized the hard black earth instantly. However, Superman didn't stop the energy output of the heat ray. He shook his head slightly and swept to the side. Diana immediately realized that she had miscalculated. The extent of the opponent's head swing was much smaller than her dodging movement. She pushed off with both feet, switched the shield to her left hand, and charged forward while enduring the heat ray. She tried to close the distance between them. The heat ray hit the shield and made a sizzling sound. Although this was a high-energy ray converted from the solar energy in Superman's body, it was still a little weak in front of Diana's divine shield. Diana didn't just blindly fight back. She made some feints from time to time while running. She switched back and forth between straight and diagonal lines and tilted her shield. She tried to attract Superman's attention with some small tricks. Realizing that Diana wanted to engage in close combat, this was exactly what Superman wanted. He stopped shooting heat rays and grabbed a mountain rock that weighed several tons with both hands and threw it at Diana. Such a large rock, even if one ignored the force it carried, the huge kinetic energy it carried was extremely powerful. The rock was huge and fast, sealing off Diana's left and right paths for her to dodge. Retreat? Diana's unyielding character made her never consider retreating, especially in battle. Even if she knew that it was not good for her, she still chose to face it head-on. She stomped hard on the ground and leaped into the air like a sharp arrow. The boulder hit the ground, and the powerful kinetic energy produced a magnificent shock wave. The planet that was originally full of ditches was smashed into a large crater. However, no one cared about the planet. Superman firmly seized the opportunity and increased his speed to the peak. He approached Diana in the roar of the sonic boom. Diana's weakness of not being used to aerial combat made her a little slow. She could only raise her shield to block Superman's thunderous blow. The invisible wave centered on the two of them spread from mid-air in all directions. The center of the two of them was still a long distance from the ground, but the aftermath of the shock still made an irregular round crater on the ground. Thea saw this scene and nodded secretly. Not to mention Diana's background, Superman's strength did not exceed her expectations by much. If her future enemies were at this level, although she might not be able to defeat them, it would not be too dangerous. However, Milady also remembered that Superman and Luthor in the original spacetime had said that he had never used his full strength in a battle. Many years of living on Earth, rational, moral, legal, and all kinds of messy things made him spontaneously shackle himself. It was difficult to judge where his true strength lay. Diana's situation was similar to Superman's. The Guardian silver bracelet provided her with a strong defense, but at the same time, it also restrained her own strength. Diana's real strength would increase by 100 times when the Guardian silver bracelet was unsealed. According to Thea's estimation, Diana would be able to kill gods like a child at that time. It could be said that they were two warriors fighting with shackles. Superman's was an artificial morality, and Diana's was a fear of her own life and the divine power of gods. Both sides did not want to cross their own bottom line. Although the battle was fierce, it was not fatal, which was why Thea did not object. "I am an Amazon warrior. I am the daughter of Zeus and Hippolyte," Diana shouted loudly, gradually falling into a disadvantageous position under Superman's fierce attack. She began to artificially raise her momentum. "I am someone's grandson, someone's son." This was a very classical way of fighting. Many legendary heroes had this habit in battle. If the enemy was also a person who respected tradition, then he had to remember the other party's family tree at this time. When he defeated the opponent, he could very pretentiously trample on the enemy while saying, "Someone's grandson, someone's son. Someone was defeated by me." To some extent, this was a classical literary version of the family tree. Superman could read all the medical books on Earth in 5 minutes. He was not a muscle warrior, and his level of knowledge was very high. He did know this habit, but it was a little embarrassing for him, an alien, to say the name of his own father and grandfather in battle. Her taciturn response had weakened his stormy attacks by a little. Diana seized the opportunity, threw away her shield, and attacked Superman with the Vulcan sword in one hand. Without the early advantage, Superman's combat intuition was still terrifyingly high. However, combat intuition could not always be there. There was a lot of randomness in it, and it was not as reliable as real martial arts. After receiving Diana's punch head-on, Superman did not notice the other party's feint, and was hit on the shoulder by the sword, leaving a shallow blood groove. The two sides paused tacitly. Without kryptonite and without falling into a weakened state, this was the first time Superman was injured in battle. This also made him realize that the body of steel was just an adjective. Nothing was absolute, and nothing was unbreakable. "Amazing, you are a powerful warrior." Superman's energy circulated slightly, and the wound healed instantly. Only the torn clothes still reminded him that there was a wound here before. "Come on." Diana saw that he was fine, and there was no fear in her heart, only excitement. Finally, there was a guy who was not afraid of her attack. Superman had the same idea as her, and the dignified look in his eyes was a little more. Chapter 463. Bang! The two switched positions in the air, and Diana once again saw an opening. The silver bracelet was imbued with immense power, and she punched Superman in the stomach. Even though he had a body of steel, this punch was enough to make Brother Superman bleed. Thea glanced at Louise without batting an eyelid. She didn't know if this punch would affect their happy life in the future. Superman realized that he was at a disadvantage when it came to fighting moves, and he instantly changed the rhythm of his attacks. He began to use his powerful physique, and instead of pursuing any moves, he used pure strength to drive his speed. His fists rained down on Diana like raindrops. As he became more serious, the frequency of his punches increased, and the yellow sun's energy absorbed in his body naturally overflowed. On this dim planet, it looked like a sun that was gradually heating up and glowing. It was getting brighter and brighter, as if a wheel of fire had risen from the horizon. Diana also refused to show weakness. She threw away the fire god's sword, and her silver bracelet of protection sensed her fighting spirit. Although it was not unsealed, a steady stream of divine power began to fill her body. She did not have the scorching heat of the sun, only the belief of protection. Streaks of silver light appeared on the surface of her body and hid in her body, and she attacked Superman. One of them shone brightly, and each of his punches carried great power. The other was like a bright moon in the sky, unparalleled in defense, and could also mix in a fatal counterattack. After fighting in the air for less than a minute, they landed on the ground. Aerial combat was not suitable for this kind of attack. Every time Superman threw a few punches, Diana only needed to fly back a few centimeters to make Superman's attacks useless. Similarly, Diana's attacks were the same, and it really went against the original intention of sparring. Entering the ground battle, Diana's martial arts skills were finally displayed to the extreme. Each of her attacks carried a burst of cold light, bright and hazy. In a short period of time, Superman took 2 punches and 1 kick. What a pity! Thea sighed. What's a pity? Even though Thea had cast Farsight on Louise, she was still dazzled. As an amateur, she really couldn't see anything. Thea blurted out that it was a pity. She only thought that it was unwise for Diana to give up the divine sword to compete with Superman. However, she also knew that it was reasonable to give up the divine sword after giving up the shield. For Diana, it was better to be empty-handed than to play with a one-handed sword. In the future, the fire deity would forge 2 one-handed swords for her. Perhaps dual-wielding was her future path? Thea, can you do this as well? You're a deity too? Louise asked with lingering fear as she watched the 2 of them dig trenches in the ground and open holes in the mountain from time to time. The eldest young mistress laughed. This question was too unprofessional. What should she say? Bragging that she was a demigod would be too much of a show-off, and there was no need for that. I'm just an ordinary earthling. I can't compare to them, haha. Louise rolled her eyes at a place where she couldn't see. Normal people. Who are you kidding? I'm an ordinary earthling, okay? Especially when Superman and the others were fighting farther and farther away. Thea could only control the materialization under her feet to catch up with them. This further confirmed Louise's thoughts. She was the only ordinary person among the 4 of them. As the energy used by the 2 of them increased, the destruction of the planet began to show. Superman had already scanned the area with his supervision early in the battle. This planet did not even have many microbes, let alone intelligent life. He had no qualms about destroying it. Diana was even more so. As long as she was not an earthling, the life and death of extraterrestrials had nothing to do with her. Even if the planet was destroyed, the few of them could go back. They had no qualms about fighting. Ah! Diana exerted force with both hands, lifting up an entire piece of the ground and throwing it at Superman. Such a crude way of fighting suited Superman's intentions perfectly. He raised his right fist and jumped up, punching through the flying object. At the same time, not to be outdone, he looked left and right. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He flew to the side, exerted force with both hands, and pulled up a mountain that was dozens of meters tall and weighed hundreds of tons from the ground. When he raised it above his head and was about to throw it, he suddenly noticed something. His eyes could not help but look into the distance. Diana reacted quickly. She realized that something had happened and stopped attacking. Seeing Superman lifting a mountain like a gorilla, Thea wanted to laugh. When she saw the change in their expressions, she also noticed that something was wrong. She switched to her supervision and looked in the direction Superman was looking. After searching for 1,500 kilometers, Thea finally noticed something strange. 2 alien spaceships landed on the surface of the planet one after another. The first spaceship was equivalent to the crash of a fugitive, and the second spaceship was the pursuers if nothing unexpected happened. Little death-courting expert landed on the ground with Louise. She did not know what had happened. She looked at Superman nervously. What's the matter? Diana could see very far. 1,500 kilometers was also within her range. She just needed to fly high. Thea truthfully told the 2 girls what she had seen. Louise was even more certain that the capitalists were not telling the truth. How could an earthling like you see 1,500 kilometers away? Superman put down the mountain regretfully. It was tiring to keep lifting it. What should I do? Or should they meddle in other people's business? Did they say anything? Can you hear them? Thea asked Superman. As the only man present, Superman listened seriously. He was a little speechless. I can hear them, but I don't understand their language. So troublesome. Thea let out a long breath. Even running to a deserted planet to watch a show could cause such a drama. This proved that Superman and Diana were very lucky to be the children of the world. If she was here alone, she could just retreat. Diana might be able to take care of the matter in front of her. Even if she was thousands of kilometers away, she might not care. Unfortunately, Superman and his wife were also in the group. These two were enthusiastic people. They were the kind of people who could not sleep if they did not take care of other people. Thea could only bite the bullet and join in. She glanced at the 30 or so people in front and behind. They were all armed with technological weapons, but she could not tell how strong they were. She could understand a few mainstream alien languages. If she really could not, she could translate through the light ring. The only thing that limited her was that her hearing was not that good. She softly chanted an incantation and released Morgan Le Fay's reality simulation. She then released a water mirror spell, projecting the movements and voices of the other people onto the mirror. It was convenient for her to translate in real time. She saw a group of people chasing after the person in front. The person in the back shouted from time to time. The person in front was tightly covered. There seemed to be lead in his clothes. It was impossible to tell who he was. Thea listened for a while and smiled bitterly. She could not understand. She could only take out the light ring. After listening for a while, she said to them, "The person in front is the Princess of Tamaran. She's called Corian. The people behind are the soldiers sent by her sister to kill her." Chapter 464. The vendetta within the royal family, the antagonism between family members, and the influence of Earth's movies and TV series made it easy for them to analyze some of the inside stories here. Everyone could see the intentions in each other's eyes. Save them. Superman was worried about leaving Louise in this desolate place. However, neither he nor Diana had the ability to take his girlfriend and fly at high speed while protecting her safety. The big burden was handed over to Thea again. Who asked her to have so many tricks up her sleeve? She conjured a plane and carried her straight into the distance. 1,500 kilometers passed in the blink of an eye for them. They arrived at the scene of the battle almost at the same time. They saw Princess Corleone, known as Spark, turning back to attack the enemy from time to time. Her palms would shoot out some kind of green energy shockwave, but she seemed to be injured. Her steps were messy, and it was difficult for her to aim. She was being pushed back by the enemy and was about to be defeated. The four idlers descended from the sky, which made them a little puzzled. Without supervision and superhearing, they thought this was a deserted planet. They didn't expect to meet intelligent life forms. Thea and Louise sat in the plane. It was yellow and they couldn't see what it was. Superman and Diana's attire was very conspicuous, especially when Diana was holding a shield and a sword. It automatically made the enemy think of some backward civilization. The leaders looked at each other and sneered. In their hearts, these guys who had descended from the sky were most likely the natives of this planet. They were the kind of primitive people who only had strength but didn't know what technology was. Princess Spark, who was not far away, had the same thought. She hurriedly shouted for the four to run. Although they didn't speak the same language, Superman could still judge from the other party's behavior that the one in front who told them to run was a good person, and the group behind who raised their technological weapons were bad guys. There was nothing to say. Fight. He was already a little angry when a good battle was interrupted. There was no need for him to tolerate this group of ignorant people. However, he still had a sense of propriety. He didn't even use 30% of his true strength. Diana was also unhappy with the way the pursuers looked at her. She also rushed forward unhappily. By the time Thea wanted to help, she discovered that the enemies were already lying on the ground. The two of them played around and defeated all the pursuers. Amidst the wailing sounds, the only one left standing was Princess Starfire. Princess Spark took off her helmet, revealing a head of red hair and orange skin. If one ignored her skin color, this woman could be considered a great beauty according to Earth's aesthetic standards. Thea translated a few sentences, but she soon realized that the princess was too talkative. She was a little annoyed by her repeated questions. Why don't you just learn it yourselves? Using the language function of the light ring, he projected the vocabulary of Tamaran's language in the form of a 3D projection in the air for the two top students to learn on the spot. Superman and Diana looked at each other and seemed to find this very interesting. At the same time, they started to remember. It turned out that Superman's father was far-sighted. The all-rounder Kryptonian's ability was simply unparalleled. Even the scholar-type Kryptonians couldn't learn as fast as him. Tamaran's language, which was much more difficult than Earth's language, was mastered by Superman in less than 30 seconds. Diana relied on Athena's wisdom as a blessing. It didn't mean that she was Athena. Although she was also learning with all her might, she was still slower than Superman by more than 2 minutes. Although he was a little slower, mastering an alien language in 2 minutes still surprised Louise. She felt that the gap between her and Clark was a little too big. Don't tell me you learn things very quickly too? While Superman and Diana went to ask Starfire, she whispered to Thea. Thea was now approachable and seemed to be full of hope. She was a completely different person from the cold and arrogant person she was when she was being interviewed. To be honest, Louise felt that it was easy to deal with her now. Vaguely understanding what she meant, Thea chuckled. I don't have such a strong learning ability. It took me 5 years to go from college to a doctorate. Louise nodded to herself. Although going from college to a doctorate in 5 years was quite an exaggeration, it was still within her acceptable range. Superman didn't finish off the enemies on the ground. Starfire was also a typical righteous person who didn't want to kill her own people. After Superman invited her to stay on Earth temporarily, she thought about it and agreed. With the battle interrupted, the few of them lost interest. Thea directly teleported back home and helped Princess Starfire find a place to stay. Only then did they say goodbye to each other. Is there something you need? Diana asked softly after everyone left. There is something. A guy who I'm not sure if he's a friend or an enemy left me a message. I have to go and help him, Thea said with a gloomy expression. Knowing that she didn't want to go into detail, Diana didn't press her. The two kissed and said, "Come back soon." Thea nodded, put on the yellow light ring, and flew out of the atmosphere. When she came to an uninhabited planet, she opened the communication channel of the yellow light ring. A 3D projection that was as tall as a human appeared. It was Sinisto. After a uniform input of energy, the projection began to speak. Thea Quinn, when you see this video, I will no longer be in this world. Although working with you isn't pleasant, it won't be annoying. The projection paused for a moment. It seemed that the original owner's emotions were fluctuating while recording this message. I don't know who will do this to me. Is it the Guardians, Hal Jordan, or someone from the Yellow Light Corps? Everything is unknown. I've experienced glory and was once the center of attention. I was the kind of hero that the Green Lights thought of. Now I'm considered a traitor, a tyrant. These are all trivial matters. I only know that I have to protect my home planet, Kaluga. That's a responsibility that's higher than my life, higher than anything else. The Yellow Lantern Corps is shrouded in fear. When I'm not in this world, their existence will destroy my home planet. Help me take care of Kruga. From today onwards, the Yellow Lantern Corps will be yours. Arkilo and Lisa Dracker will pledge their loyalty to you. They are elites who can control fear. You have to be careful of Mungo's son. He is a man with great ambition but little talent. My departure will definitely give him an opportunity to take advantage of. I've never been wrong about people. I know you'll help me. After the video ended, Sia snorted in displeasure. Sinisto was asking for help, yet he had put himself on such a high pedestal. He didn't even say a word of thanks from beginning to end. However, he did know Thea very well. She really wouldn't reject such a request that was almost like a dying wish. Strange, if he's no longer in this world, why didn't that part of the yellow light ring return to me? Did it blow up directly? Or did someone tamper with it? Her first suspect was the little blue guardians who had lived for hundreds of millions of years. These guys had unfathomable strength. It was hard to say if they were controlling something behind the scenes. Chapter 465. The planet controlled by Jared was not far from Korriga. Thea ordered the official members of the Light Ring, the Dead Man, and Fiora to meet up with her there. She tried to find Sinisto's last traces based on the faint connection she had with the lamp ring. This was the wreckage of a planet. Countless cosmic dust was floating here, and from time to time, there were boulders that could not bear the weight and broke into pieces under the influence of gravity. Thea followed the guidance of the light ring and gradually approached this area. There were still many traces of battle here, and emotional energy was still filling this place. On one side was the green light of courage, and on the other side was the yellow light of fear. The green light was not unfamiliar to her. It was the one that she had worn for a short time, the one that Hal Jordan had inherited from Abin Su. The yellow light was even more familiar. It came from the same source as her light ring. It was Sinisto. She looked into the distance and did not see any corpse. When she was about to explore deeper, a figure suddenly flashed not far from her side. The white-haired, blue-skinned guardian wearing a red suit and a white robe was looking at her thoughtfully. Only one. Thea looked around blatantly and found that there was only one guardian in front of her. She put away the teleportation gem in her hand. She nodded slightly and said, "Respected guardian, what alarmed you and made you leave the main planet of A that you have guarded for hundreds of millions of years?" "Hello, Earthling, we meet again. You can call me Gans," the little blue guardian said expressionlessly. "Oh, it's him?" Gans could be said to be the only guardian who still had feelings. Maybe it was because he was kind by nature, or maybe it was because the ring of the first lantern warrior Huarong was sealed in his body so his feelings were not completely erased. This guy could be said to be the only guardian left who could be dealt with. Thea followed his advice and said, "Lord Gans, is there anything I can help you with?" She could not see the depths of their strength on Oyo that day. Now that she was a demigod, she finally had some understanding of the strength of these guys. Strong. Really strong. She just used an imperceptible spirit power to sweep the edge of his body, and it was easily bounced off by an indescribable force. The guardian named Ganser looked at her blankly as if he didn't know. Thea gritted her teeth. No one she knew was as strong as him. Although in the original space-time, Gon the boasted that Spectre was not as good as him and was pressed to the ground by Spectre 3 minutes later, his level was indeed higher than the current Thea. Thea felt that she had to at least become a new god or fuse with the Parallax monster to be able to compete with him. Gonsei didn't mind her little tricks. Perhaps it was because of the billions of years that they had spent together, but there were too many people who wanted to test them. They were all immune to it. Do you think Sinisto did the right thing? He used his own order, his own understanding, to plunge the planet into a vortex of fear. Hal Jordan disagreed with his actions and the two fought. "You and Hal are both from Earth. What is your point of view?" Thea really didn't think about this question. Half an hour ago, Kaluja's explosion had nothing to do with her. She was as busy as a spinning top every day. How could she have the time to think about it blindly? After thinking about it seriously, she had to admit that the various philosophical works on Earth were very rich. Predecessors had already come to a conclusion on this matter. She just had to modify it slightly and add in some of her own understanding to become a new theory. Sinisto used his own power to establish the order of the planet. He enforced the law and judged the people on the planet. He required everyone on the planet to live according to his plan. From birth to death, he arranged everything neatly. Earth has a special term for this kind of thing. It's called a utopia. It means a utopia that can't be done. No one on Earth does this. Without the intervention of supernatural forces, the ancient sages only tried this utopia in some small colonies. Reality told them that it doesn't work at all. Gandha was just listening in a daze. Now that she had caught his attention, the powerful guardian couldn't help but ask, "Why?" Freedom. People don't have freedom or the right to choose. They lose their life goals, expectations, and hope. Everyone falls into numbness and trifles, wasting their time doing nothing. Hope. Gandha muttered to himself. Thea's words were getting smoother and smoother. She didn't care if he was listening or not. She continued, "The ancient sages of Earth gave up the utopian idea. We are walking on a free and unrestrained path. Let me give you a negative example. Krypton. You know about Krypton, right?" Gandha nodded. He knew about such a famous planet. He also had a premonition of what Thea was going to say next. Krypton has the best genetic modification technology in the universe. They screen the babies at the embryonic stage and use a huge algorithm to calculate the future direction of the child. Before they are born, they have already determined their future direction. Every Kryptonian understands their mission when they can remember. Like a machine, they do their own things in a cycle. Their planet was eventually destroyed. Only one Kryptonian who gave birth naturally escaped. His parents gave him the right to choose. The glory of humanity is now sprinkled on Earth. This is the birth of a great soul. Gandha seemed to be thinking about the truth behind her words. Hope, is it? Hope can change life. Only hope can save them? He muttered to himself. Slowly, he seemed to understand some truth. There was a hint of emotion on his emotionless face. He stepped back emotionlessly and threw a residue wrapped in energy to Thea before disappearing. This is the remaining part of Sinisto's ring. I have collected it. You should be able to use its power. Sinisto was only banished to the anti-material world. Don't worry. According to the records of the Book of Ura, his story has not ended. Take care, Earthlings with ideas. We will meet again. It was not until this person disappeared without a trace that Sia looked at the ball of energy. She was not worried about Sinisto. This old man first served the Green Lantern, then the Yellow Lantern, then the Green Lantern, and then the Yellow Lantern again. In the records of the Green Lantern history, he seemed to have returned to the Green Lantern for retirement. Sinisto's life had been changing between Green Lantern, Yellow Lantern, and White Lantern for a short period of time. It could be said that his story had just begun. It was not an exaggeration to describe him as having 3 ups and downs. Gonda kept talking about hope. Was this a sign that he was going to establish a Blue Lantern? Thea shrank her neck. In all honesty, she was just talking nonsense. There was no special purpose. Chapter 466. The Guardians, who had lived for hundreds of millions of years, did not understand the thoughts of intelligent life, and forcibly used their way of thinking to interpret the world. It could be said that 70% of the major events in the universe were created by these little blue people according to their own ideas. Day did not understand the darkness of night. Different levels of life had different ideas and heights. Thea did not know what she said that resonated with Gonda so much. The timeline of this world was already very messy, and now with her messing things up, she did not know what would happen in the future. She would deal with the future in the future. She urgently needed to deal with the remnant of the lamp ring in her hand. She found a cave on a nearby planet and began to examine it carefully. The more she looked, the more distressed she felt. Hal Jordan and Sinisto were both idiots. The energy impact of their love and hate had actually caused the lamp ring to explode. Thea let go of her lamp ring and began to use fear to communicate with the energy in the remnant. Now, her control over her mental strength had long surpassed that of these lanterns. They were all one-off businesses. Everyone's mental strength was what they were born with. Without training, it was as much as it should be. It would almost never grow after the day they were born. They themselves lacked mental power and relied on the so-called willpower to control emotions. Those with strong willpower like Hal Jordan could finish his apprenticeship in 3 days and beat his master to the anti-material world in 5 days. Other professions had a step-by-step process that was easy to learn but difficult to master. Lanterns did not need to accumulate experience at all. In fact, there was not much difference between a lifetime of work and 3 days of work. The difference was obvious at a glance. This was because they did not have the help of mental power, and could only rely on their own willpower to withstand the emotional impact. Thea now felt that these little blue guardians were pretending. With just a little contact, Thea could tell that Gonda had cultivated mental power or some kind of higher internal power. They knew that mental power had a promoting effect on the lanterns, but they pretended not to know and watched the lanterns use their own will to break in with the world's will. The result was self-evident. Sinisto, Hal Jordan, and the other strong-willed men were driven to the brink of death by them. It was evident that they had killed them. However, it was understandable that Thea would also hold back when she did things, but she would not go overboard. It was not a matter of holding back, but at the very least they would hold back 7 or 8 times. The communication between the ring and Residue was not smooth. The 2 rings had been separated for too long, and Residue did not agree with Thea very much. Now it had to add an update. Unfortunately, Thea was not a regular lantern. She was not an ordinary person who could not do anything after taking off her ring. He directly incited the fire magic to smelt the remaining wills. If he was happy, they could obey him. If he was unhappy, they had to obey him. She might not be able to deal with Gancelli, but if Thea couldn't deal with this ring, then she would have wasted so many years of effort. She had even mixed a trace of power of will into it. The remnants of the lamp ring could no longer withstand it, and yellow particles kept flying into her lamp ring. The originally pale yellow lamp ring was gradually darkening. The weak resistance was suppressed by force, and the strong resistance was transformed by power of will. The speed of fusion was gradually increasing. Thea tried to imprint her spiritual imprint into the ring during the fusion period. The ring almost did not resist, and it acquiesced to her ownership. With this imprint, her control over the ring had deepened a bit. Even if Sinisto jumped out now and shouted himself hoarse, the ring would not listen to him. If you want the yellow ring, you have to remake it yourself. After 4 hours of hard work, all the residue was absorbed, and the color depth exceeded Sinisto's that day. The ring exuded a golden sun-like light, and Thea immediately closed her eyes to feel it. Materialization, protective shield, high-speed flight, wormhole, these basic functions were all there. Her original ring's functions of phase shift, space warp, teleportation, and Kryptonian recharge were all retained. Instilling fear, which originally occupied half of the abilities of both of them, was also completed. However, she could already use this ability with magic, so it was not very meaningful to her now. Energy twin, environment playback, invisibility, light refraction, cell regeneration, energy absorption, and other functions were all retained. The energy twin function was not explained clearly, so she tried it on the spot. The lamp ring would release an energy clone the size of a person at a designated location. When the energy clone was in existence, the body would remain still, while the energy clone could move at extremely high speed. After the emotional support was removed, the clone would return to the body, and all the knowledge it had learned would be transferred to the ring bearer. It seems to be a learning ability? Thea did not see how useful this clone was to her. It could not speak, and it was yellow all over. Anyone could tell that it was a fake person. The only advantage was that it could go to many dangerous places. The body stood outside, and the clone ignored all the traps and moved at high speed to start memorizing. After that, regardless of life or death, it would bring the knowledge to the body. It could be said that when the two rings were reunited, many of the functions that she had envied were now useless. Thea was not very used to wearing it every time she used it. She could cast spells at will, and it was much more convenient and faster than the lamp ring. Sigh, I'm already so strong. Thinking back to the original experience, the lamp ring was like a step to the sky for ordinary people, but for her it was just icing on the cake. The emotion amplification function of the lamp ring was still affected by the broken ring. Thea's original ring could amplify emotions by 150 times. Now that the two rings were reunited, the amplification did not exceed 240 times, which was 30% less than she expected. Calculating the time, most of the dead people had already arrived. Thea did not waste any time and tried the wormhole of the new ring. It was faster and more stable, and the speed of flying at full speed could exceed the speed of light. The first yellow ring in the world was indeed worthy of its reputation. This kind of power and speed was really intoxicating. Thea could not fly so fast by herself, and she was only the first yellow ring. Just like lantern number 1, regardless of whether it was the rainbow lantern or not, he directly obtained the first lantern ring in the universe that gathered all the primitive emotions in the universe. His power was instantly raised to the peak of the true God, and he could easily change history and reality. It could be seen that the impact of emotional energy on one's will was simply crushing. Thea did not want to be a slave to emotions, but she did not give up eating for fear of choking. The lamp ring was just a tool to her. If it was not for the fact that she automatically changed into the tights every time she wore it, she might have been able to use it a few more times. Now it was dispensable. When she arrived at Gruder's planet, the 3 official members of the Yellow Lantern Corps, Deadman, Fiora, and Gruder, were waiting for her. Sia briefly explained the situation. Taking into account that Sinisto had recruited a large number of soldiers in order to fight against the Green Lanterns of the 3,600 sectors in the later stages of the war, the current Yellow Lantern Corps of Korriga had at least 1,000 people. More than 1,000 temporary workers who had not been confirmed by the Book of Parallax. Chapter 467. 1 man against 1,000 men sounded very majestic, and the visual impact was very strong. However, it was best not to use it if the difference in strength was not as great as the difference between heaven and earth. There were countless strong people in history, such as Darkseid and Thanos. They were all arrogant and brave, but they were all pushed down by the righteous side and rubbed against the ground. Although Thea did not think much of the Yellow Lantern soldiers, she might not be able to win against hundreds and thousands of them. Unity is strength. This was applicable in 99% of situations. It was unrealistic to attack by force. Kruga's civilization level was not low. Even if it was not comparable to Krypton, which was a level 8 civilization, it was at least level 6. Unlike Earth, where aliens could come and go as they pleased, it was like a market. Kruga had a defense system. Although there was a large population on Kruga, Their civilization level was only slightly higher than the natives. Space warships were out of the question. Fiora had gathered some neutral mercenaries in the universe and had a few warships, but the character of the mercenaries was hard to predict. They could be used in a favorable battle, but with such a large number of enemies, it was possible that they would defect to the enemy directly. The enemy had more people, and their defense system was intact. They had fewer people and they had to attack. There was only one choice in front of Sia, and that was to organize a small team to carry out a surprise attack, as had been done countless times in movies. She instructed Fiora to get the few people on Earth. They could not fight in space, but their fighting ability on the ground was off the charts. She began to contact Sinisto's supporters in Kruga. The more guides there were, the better. The first person she contacted was Lisa Draka, who claimed to have a certain precognitive ability. Unfortunately, she could not get through. She also knew Akiro, who was mentioned by Sinisto. He was a tall and burly blue-skinned alien. He was the training officer of the Yellow Lantern Corps. Akiro had once gone to Earth alone to gain Thea's approval. He was loyal and honest. Although he was a barbaric guy, Thea had a good impression of him. Unfortunately, she could not contact this guy either. Needless to say, it must be because of Sinisto's disappearance. His ambitious subordinates had defeated his loyal subordinates. She could not contact the members of the Light Ring. Fortunately, she had other means to contact others. Asona, can you hear me? Telescopic vision, supervision, imaging technique, and the light refraction and projection function of the Light Ring. Spells, abilities, and the three abilities of the Light Ring were integrated together and began to communicate across light years. Who? The purple alien woman on the other side of the camera was a bit surprised. She stared at the water curtain that suddenly appeared in front of her and asked tentatively, "Thank God you're still alive. I'm Thea, remember? I'm Sinisto's." Thea thought for a long time. Was she related to Sinisto? It was almost unrelated. "I'm Sinisto's colleague. We've met once before." Thea could not think of anything good to say, so she could only give a vague answer. The purple alien woman nodded calmly. "I have a deep impression of you. Sinisto complained many times that you took away his supreme power." Thea almost vomited blood. She knew that Sinisto had said something bad about her behind her back. Although this woman was not a member of the Light Ring, she was the highest commander of the Koruga Defense Force. At the same time, she was also Sinisto's lover after his wife died. The two must have talked about her after they did something indescribable. That was why this woman had a deep impression of her. Having an impression was better than not having one. "How's the situation in Koruga? Sinisto left me a message. Is there anything I can help you with?" The purple woman, Asona, said stiffly. "Koruga does not need another dictator. Sinisto betrayed his people and betrayed me. Koruga does not need any lanterns, green or yellow. We don't need any." After that, she threw something that looked like a weapon at the water curtain. However, it was useless. Thea's water curtain was invisible. If she did not cancel it, no one could do anything about it. After throwing things for a long time, Asona threw a tantrum and looked at the water curtain with a serious face. "What do you want?" "I want to fulfill a promise. Or rather, help Sinisto get rid of his Yellow Lantern Corps and liberate Koruga. And after that?" "After that?" Thea thought for a while. "The unqualified Light Ring members will be stripped of their rings and sent back to where they came from. I'll take the rest with me. In the future, Earth would be the center of the universe. Other than Sinisto, no one would care about a planet like Koruga." This answer was out of Asona's expectations. She was a very decisive woman. "What do you need me to do?" "Help me find a secret room. I want to take the team directly to Koruga." As the person in charge of the planet's military force, Asona immediately thought of a few words. She did not know that Thea did not have enough manpower. She only thought that the other party was not going to launch a large-scale attack. This was very much in line with her intentions. "Okay." Asona agreed without hesitation. Before ending the call, Thea told her, "Collect information about the Corps. See you later." After that, she began to set up a long-distance teleportation circle. The Light Ring's foundation had increased greatly, so there was no need to abandon it. At the same time, she was also worried that Asona would do something bad to them. The teleportation circle was reinforced with magic and emotional energy at the same time. Could last for a long time and the channel was stable. Without a specific method, even a nuclear bomb could not destroy it. The few people from Earth quickly arrived. The somewhat awkward electric lady still put on her imitation light ring. The suggestion spell was constantly affecting her. Death Knell and Poison Ivy were fine, but this was the first time Father Midnight had come to an alien planet. Especially when he saw many primitive natives carrying the chubby Grutter to meet up with them, he was even more surprised. Is this guy also my companion? Fiora stood alone beside Thea and watched her make the teleportation circle. Death Knell and Father Midnight came from a mixed background, so they had more in common. After that, Grutter joined their conversation. On the other side, Death Knell was bragging with Poison Ivy and Electric Lady. They also brought some people with them. There were alien subordinates recruited by Fiora and native warriors controlled by Grutter. Death Knell also brought more than 100 elite soldiers and his daughter, Rose Wilson, who was also a powerful warrior. Another thing that caught Thea's attention was that Death Knell had recruited a psychic. She was an earth lady who could control soil and rocks. However, she was too young to be used as the main force. As for her subordinates, she did not think too much. Those who could catch her eye were all powerful people. It was normal for them to want to develop their forces. Just like what she said to Gon, that there was only motivation when there was hope. Chapter 468. Each of them had about 500 subordinates. In order to allow some of the bigger guys, such as Grud, to pass through, Sia had increased the height and width of both sides by a lot. From afar, it looked like a miniature version of the Dark Portal. This portal was also an experiment for herself. She gathered emotional energy into her magic power, and the materialized materials were connected with magic power. At the intersection of magic power, the portal would appear for protection. Traditionally, the materialization of a lantern would dissipate immediately without emotional energy. Thea first inputted some of her emotions, and then wrapped the portal with magic power. Even without her support, the portal could still last for half a day. Everyone, let's go. Don't move the natives. Kill anyone wearing a yellow coat who attacks us. Thea carefully checked the coordinates and then turned back to order. According to the plan, the dead would go first. Even if Athona changed, he would be able to possess her and control her. Then it would be Fiora and her subordinates. The shrewd female adjutant was capable of fighting and carrying and could deal with any situation. Then it would be the warriors from Earth and Grud. Thea looked at the last to make sure there were no mistakes. Then she stepped into the portal. On the other side, the battle scene did not appear. It seemed that Athona was a very trustworthy person. Thea walked out of the crowd. Although she did not like the clothes, she was here to take over the army today. She still changed into the somewhat shameful tight combat suit. What's the situation now? Thea asked Athona, who was also fully armed. The defense of this planet was too comprehensive. The interference of metal and various electromagnetic interference were affecting her supervision. She wanted to find the central power source of the yellow lights, but she could not find it even after looking for a long time. This close friend of Sinisto looked at Thea's yellow combat suit. Her pupil shrank a little, but she quickly got rid of the unnecessary emotions and said loudly, "Come to our headquarters. Those Yellow Lantern villains are destroying our city everywhere." With Death Knell and Fiora, two experienced veterans, Sia arrived at the frontline command of the Korriga Resistance Army. It could be seen that Sinisto was not unprepared for the possibility of a rebellion. He had equipped some of his compatriots with weapons that could counter the hard light of the lantern rings. However, Korriga had been peaceful for too long, and many of the Yellow Lanterns were notorious bandits. The rebellion army lost 15 cities in an extremely short period of time, and a large number of elites died in the first wave. If Thea had not intervened in time, it would have only been a matter of time before they were exterminated and enslaved. Do you know what a central energy source is? Thea was worried that she might not be able to express herself clearly, so she showed her a portable lamp with a charging ring in her water mirror. It's something 100 times bigger than this. Have you seen it before? Do you know where it is? Asona had indeed seen it before. After all, it was impossible for a lantern that was several hundred meters tall and completely golden in color to go unnoticed. Sinisto might be able to hide it, but such a large item had very high requirements for a place to hide it. I've seen it before. I think it's in the depths of Satara City. Senisto had hollowed out 20 kilometers underground and placed a lot of things there. Asona recalled. What are you going to do? My ring can control the central energy source. It will take back all the energy in the ring. When dealing with some unarmed alien criminals, I'm sure the resistance army will be enough to deal with them, right? If the ring loses its power, then what about you? Asona's meaning was self-evident. Thea smiled brightly. Even Asona, who was also a woman, was a little dazed. Haha, to the Senisto army the ring is everything. But to me and my men, it's just one of the means. We have crossed the distant sea of stars, traveled through time and space, and witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. The power of a mere lantern ring is too insignificant for us. Haha. Asona did not understand. Thea was bragging without paying taxes. She had bragged so much that if one did not look at her, they would have thought that she was the heavenly father of the new creator planet. Asona's eyes were filled with stars. She did not believe it, but the previous conversation and teleportation made her realize that the woman in front of her had an ability that Senisto did not have. She no longer bothered about the lantern ring and explained to them in detail what they needed to pay attention to in Satara City. Half an hour later, the assault team led by Thea had arrived at the outskirts of the city. There were all kinds of detection equipment in front. She did not dare to charge in with her invisibility spell. The invisibility spell of more than 500 people required a lot of magic power. Thea planned to split a portion of them into a feint attack while the rest attacked the city. Death Knell stopped her and gestured for the Earthen Girl to come forward. The Earthen Girl, who was only 8 or 9 years old, was now being dragged to an alien planet to fight. Most girls would have fainted from fear, but this girl was quite strong. When she saw Death Knell looking at her, she nervously pressed her hands on the ground. Rumble. A very dull sound was heard. She controlled the soil and kept flipping it up. The solid ground seemed to be playing a game with her. Several tons of soil and stones flew out automatically. What appeared in front of them was a deep pit that was 17 or 18 meters deep and 10 meters wide. Yo, not bad. Thea had not absorbed Gaia's divinity yet. She could only cast a few simple earth attribute spells. She could dig a hole to bury someone in her daily life. This kind of large-scale movement of the earth veins was a bit like earthquake, collapse, and silence. She could not cast it as easily as the Earthen Girl. If they could dig into the ground silently, it would save them a lot of trouble. Using her X-ray vision, she saw that it was not too far from Senisto's underground base. It was less than 2,000 meters away. The little girl is not bad. This will help her recover her strength. Tell her to dig the hole diagonally below the spot I indicated. This little girl was too young and was not worth her time. She would need at least 5 or 6 years to grow up. That was too long. Thea threw Death Knell a gemstone that could recover his strength. It was better for him to give orders to his subordinates. Death Knell was very excited. As Thea had more and more talented subordinates, his importance was declining. He urgently needed to prove his worth, so he was determined to bring the 9-year-old Earthen Girl out. Okay. Death Knell nodded heavily at the Earthen Girl. Because of her ability, she was treated as an oddball in the village. If Death Knell had not saved her, she would have been burned to death by the villagers. Seeing Death Knell's signal, just like a manga character, he was filled with motivation as he desperately needed recognition. His eyes shone brightly, and his psionic ability was fully activated. Following Sia's mark, he dug deeper. The young lady did not feel guilty about hiring a child as she constantly controlled the Earthen Girl. 10 degrees to the left. A little more. Chapter 469. After 10 minutes of hard work, a tunnel that was 1,000 meters deep and 10 meters wide was opened. The S-Stone lady's ability consumed her mental strength and stamina. Her stamina was replenished by the technological potions, and Thea helped her activate part of her mental strength. Considering that she was still young, she did not spoil her growth and only improved her mental strength a little. After checking the bottom of the tunnel and confirming that there were no traps, Thea led the 500-strong tomb raiding team into the underground palace. No Senisto's back cave. They did not see any traps along the way, but they encountered a lot of security devices. The disadvantage of having too many people was unavoidable. One of the mercenaries accidentally stepped on a trap, and the wall immediately rang with a rapid alarm. Forget it. Let's go to the southwest. Thea could only see that the direction was blocked by her X-ray vision. The central power source must be there. On one hand, she contacted Asona to launch a ground attack to attract some of the enemies. On the other hand, she cast a large area of effect haste on the tomb raiding team to start a race against the enemies. The team rushed for 4 or 5 minutes before they were stopped by a group of Yellow Lantern Corps at a crossroad. It could be seen that the enemy had gathered in a hurry, and there were less than 100 of them. The sludge, whose body was made of corrosive liquid, was also in the team. It was one of the few official members of the Yellow Lantern Corps that Thea had seen. It could borrow the ability of the corpse wrapped in liquid when it was alive. It was difficult to judge this guy by the human sense of good and evil because it was not even a living creature. It was even more out of the question whether it was a traitor or not. This guy probably did not even have the concept of betrayal. This area had a lot of visual interference, and Thea did not see the Yellow Lantern Corps' deadliest killer. A supervirus that could only be seen through a microscope. They might have a miniature enemy. Let your plants start searching. Thea turned to Poison Ivy. Plants had different sensory systems from living creatures, and they were best at searching for enemies like microbes. Some plants could also release interferons which were fatal to viruses. The enemy group was in chaos, and a burly alien with a yellow face and a height of 5 meters stood out. Master of the Book of Parallax, are you here to congratulate me on conquering Kaluga and becoming the leader of the Corps? The alien's orange eyes automatically looked at Thea. Who are you? Thea pretended to be confused. She recognized this burly guy at a glance. Little Mungo, or Mungo II. His father, Old Mungo, had attacked Seaside City on Earth in Thea's memory. But in this space-time, Old Mungo had led the so-called army that had conquered the entire universe to attack the main planet of Ura. She didn't know if he was crazy or he didn't take medicine. Gondha could not defeat the Spectre in a one-on-one fight, but this did not mean that the Guardian Blue Men were weak. It was just that the Spectre, the vengeful spirit of God, was too strong. Furthermore, there was not just Gondha on the main planet of Ura. There were 6 other Guardian Blue Men with the same combat strength. In addition, there were 7,200 official Green Lanterns, a considerable number of reserves, and a small number of elite Supreme Green Lanterns with modified bodies. Facing such a powerful force, Mungo, who was full of confidence, crashed into it head-on. This wasn't the Green Lantern Corps that Hal Jordan had led after the Lights Out incident, and there were only a few of them. What greeted him was the Green Lantern Corps at their peak. A green sea that covered the entire planet of Ura crushed his invincible army into dust. Similarly, his body, which had been tempered thousands of times to the point of being able to attack Superman, was shattered into pieces. The result of tens of thousands of people attacking him was that his head was sent to Ura's showroom. Senisto had taken in his son, who was now standing in front of Thea. It had to be said that his genes and physique were indeed extraordinary. When others wore one light ring, he might feel that the effect was not strong enough, but he wore 4 rings of the same attribute. A normal person would need a strong willpower to wear one ring. Just like Thea, wearing different colored rings required different emotions. It was different from this person who wore 4 rings. Senisto and Hal Jordan were both strong-willed people. When had anyone ever seen them wear 2 rings of the same color? There was no need for this at all. The amount of emotion output per unit of time was fixed for everyone. The advantage of wearing 4 rings of the same color was probably just to maintain the firepower. When one light ring's energy was depleted, the next one would be replaced. Or one light ring could be used to attack while the other one was used to defend. At least Thea could only think of these functions. There were some advantages, but the disadvantages were huge. The emotional consumption of the ring bearer was also doubled, so it was not universal. In Thea's opinion, Mungo II was a little neglectful. The strong body and mental strength he had inherited from his father had been used on the light ring. The original spacetime was also a traitor, and he was killed by Senisto, who had tampered with the light ring. Thea did not have such means now, but in her opinion, it would not take too much effort to deal with this guy who had abandoned his family's secret arts and switched to playing with rings. His father could fight Superman head-on, so his body's genes should be very strong. In a while, she would have to control the intensity of her attacks. It would be best to preserve the body for reference. Mungo II did not know that his background had been exposed. Thea was going to take his body back for research. As if he was about to quarrel with someone, he shouted anxiously, "I am Mungo, the ruler of Korriga, the emperor of the universe tomorrow." Thea sneered. Her laughter was a little harsh. Mungo, whose self-esteem was severely hurt, stretched out his waxy left hand, and a hammer made of fear energy smashed towards Thea. Interesting. His opponent wasn't brainless. His attack was still worth watching. For layers. Thea glanced at it and saw that this manifestation was a little confusing. It looked very ordinary from the outside, but it was actually a set of 4 manifestations. The emotional manifestation of the temporary light ring was too weak, and Mungo could not work on quality. He could only pursue quantity. However, this was meaningless in the face of absolute power. Fiora stood beside Thea and saw the huge hammer coming towards her. Her expression did not change, and she smashed the manifestation with one hand. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th layers did not mean much to her. Her move shocked the yellow lanterns on the other side. She did not rely on any emotional energy, nor did she rely on any technological equipment. With just a casual punch, she shattered Mungo's attack, which they thought was invincible. The yellow lanterns, who were all villains, could not help but feel their momentum stagnate. Thea's side had more people than them to begin with. With this, the yellow lanterns were even more vulnerable. Leave the big guy's body intact. Kill the rest. Thea said lightly. As soon as she finished speaking, the electric lady, whose temperament had changed drastically and who had a tendency to be violent, rushed out first. This underground base had a lot of electrical equipment. She rushed directly into the midst of the enemies, and a silver-white electric current began to wreak havoc in the crowd. Chapter 470. Poison Ivy had planted a large number of plants on the battlefield while they were talking. Now, under her control, the plants broke through the ground. The yellow lanterns were used to fighting in the real world, so they were caught off guard by the plants and the electric lady. Some of them were electrocuted, some had their bodies corroded by the mucus from the acidic plants, some were swallowed whole by the man-eating plants, and some had their hands and feet entangled by the vines. There were all kinds of situations. Death Knell was not to be outdone. He dodged the yellow lights and charged in from the side. In his left hand was a titanium alloy sword, and in his right hand was an acid attribute magic sword that he had obtained from the Church of the Cold Flame. Many of the aliens looked very abstract, and he did not care what the enemies looked like. He just slashed at their necks, wrists, and ankles. His physical fitness had long surpassed the limits of the human body. Coupled with his strange footwork and proficient martial arts, many yellow lanterns were cut down by him like a whirlwind, just as they realized that there was someone around them. Midnight Daddy cast 2 group spells. His magic was not as strong as Thea's, so the effect was barely satisfactory. Suddenly he saw a sludge that looked like a sludge monster trying to run away. There was a corpse hidden in its outer membrane, but Midnight didn't care. The corpse looked like an alien, and it had nothing to do with his ancestral spirits on Earth. He chanted a spell and forcefully controlled it. Not to mention, the ancestral spirit of Earth was quite powerful. It used magic to communicate with the corpse, and under the influence of its psychic ability, the corpse extended a bone claw from the body of the sludge. The sludge that was running away was severely injured, and a large amount of liquid in its body flowed out from the wound. Midnight Daddy followed up with another attack. He put his palms together and caused the corpse to explode inside the sludge. This official member that was personally recruited by Sanisto and registered by Thea exploded into a puddle of acid. Its weak cell walls could no longer sustain the loss of energy in its body. It fell to the ground and did not move anymore. Thea took out the Parallax book. Following the death of the sludge as an official member, there was a record of its life in the book. Its life history slowly emerged with its death. This thing was originally born on a barren planet. In an accident, an unlucky interstellar traveler's spaceship crashed on this planet, and its corpse coincidentally fell into its body. Only then did it slowly gain self-awareness. Even with the Parallax book, it was difficult to determine whether the consciousness in the sludge was the consciousness of the unlucky interstellar traveler, or the remnant consciousness of the barren planet. However, its corpse was also very valuable for research. Thea first used her ring's high authority and magic power to stop Huang Ring from looking for a new ring-bearer. She had no choice but to do so. If she killed one, Huang Ring would find another. That would be an endless cycle. Fortunately, there were only a few official rings, and the rest of the temporary rings did not have the ability to find new ring-bearers. Thea had just wrapped up the corpse of the sludge when she saw another ring fly into the air. Who died? She looked to see if it was someone from her side, but the ring did fly out from the battlefield. There was only one truth. The member of the Ring of Lanterns that could only be seen with a microscope, the deadly virus Dispulus, was dead. A virus that had evolved to such a degree of self-awareness should have a lot of research value. Unfortunately, this thing was too small. Who knew what equipment Sinisto had installed underground? Thea's supervision could not be used at all. She stared for a long time but could not find the guy's corpse. The most important question was, the sludge was killed by Midnight Daddy. Who killed this thing? It could not have been trampled to death, right? Thea used part of her magic power to control the Ring of Lanterns that was about to fly away. She looked at the records in the Parallax book. It was indeed dead. Thea asked her friends, but no one knew how this thing died. Maybe it was killed by the plant's enhanced interferon? The botanist, Poison Ivy, put forward her opinion at the right time. Thea searched everywhere but to no avail. She could only agree with this theory. In fact, she was more inclined to think that this guy was knocked out by the interferon and then was trampled to death by a guy with a big foot in the battle. The two sides were fighting in full swing. She could not stop them. They all raised their feet and let her look for the cockroach. She sighed slightly. There were so many viruses in the universe. It was not easy to evolve one with self-awareness. Was it easy? It was such a pity that he died without being able to display any value. The situation on the battlefield was one-sided. The most eye-catching one was the Lightning Lady. It was hard not to notice her from the sound and light effects. Silver-white electric current was constantly being thrown out by her. She used to be a live streamer and had very few fights. She also wanted to throw some lightning bolts coolly, but her accuracy was worrying. She also had problems controlling her power. She was clearly aiming at the enemy in front of her. The enemy had also conjured a shield. She did not expect that she would swing her hand and hit the face of the enemy next to her. The Yellow Lanterns did not know that her accuracy was poor and thought that this was her fighting style. A group of people came over to besiege her. The Lightning Lady was least afraid of being besieged. Coupled with the fact that she could not control the electric current, her AoE damage could be said to be number one on the scene. Coupled with the fact that she would occasionally flash out of the encirclement and run from one group to another to release electric current, the Yellow Lanterns were beaten to a pulp. Not everyone could be like Sinisto and Thea, who could create a giant to protect their entire body. Most people could only conjure a part of their body armor. Everyone was suffering from the electric current. Unless they were a special life form, there were not many who were immune to electric shocks. I can't fight like this. Originally, when he saw that Thea did not make a move, and the seemingly fierce Fiora did not join the battle, Mungo too, who considered himself the emperor of the universe, also stood still. Now he felt that he had to make a move. Although it was a little embarrassing, he was still prepared to get rid of the Lightning Lady who was the biggest threat to his side. He took a step forward and was instantly stunned. He could only feel that something was squeezing into his body, and at the same time it was as if a giant hammer was hammering his head. He did not know that this was the cooperation of the dead man and Grud. One was drilling into his body, while the other was forcefully controlling him. His willpower had already been worn down by the 4 lantern rings. Now that he encountered the skills of these two hooligans, he kept losing ground in his spiritual world. The control of his whole body had already been squeezed out by 1/3. It would be strange if he could still move. Seeing that the generals were fighting beautifully, the morale of the soldiers on Thea's side was greatly boosted. Deathnell's daughter was particularly eye-catching. Her fighting style was very similar to her father's. Her double swords flew up and down. Her strength, speed, and skills were not inferior to Thea's in the past. The natives brought by Grud were also quite brave. Every day, they carried this several tons of gorilla and ran around the mountain. A few of them had really trained their strength. The javelins that were as thick as an arm were thrown by them, leaving afterimages. The throwing objects of the leader of the strong men could even shatter the shield. Chapter 471. Mungo too was dragged into the spiritual world by Grudra and Deadman to play tug-of-war. Sludge and Supervirus were directly destroyed, and the remaining yellow lanterns died one after another. If it weren't for the constant return of the Lantern Ring members from the battlefield on the ground, they would have collapsed long ago. However, they had no coordination ability and no command system. There were too many loopholes in their fighting style. Facing Thea, who had the upper hand, they were beaten to a pulp. One after another, two after another, three after another. It seemed that they were still persevering, but the number of people who supported Mungo was rapidly decreasing. Many people had begun to think of a way out. Seeing that the situation was good, Fiora, the adjutant, as the highest combat power second only to Thea, personally came out. On the battlefield, enemies and allies were mixed, and powerful moves were not suitable to be used. This was a little restrictive for Superman Supergirl, who could punch a hole in the ground and break a mountain with a kick, but Fiora didn't have this problem. Her combat skills were already very delicate. The Kryptonian combat skills she used back then were no longer suitable for her body that had skyrocketed. However, she still had her combat experience. If Superman was like a farmer with infinite strength, then Fiora was like a thief with full strength. Her figure was extremely fast as she weaved in and out of the crowd. None of her attacks were a match for her. These ordinary materializations were completely defenseless against her. After killing more than 10 people in an instant, she walked to the side of the dazed Mungo too. She signaled to Deadman and Grudra in the distance, and the two people, orangutans, withdrew the control at the same time. Mungo was dizzy and didn't understand what was going on. He saw Fiora grabbing the top of his head with one hand and his chin with the other. With a crisp crack, the giant's neck was directly broken by her. His tenacious vitality prevented him from dying immediately. His lips moved slightly as if he wanted to say something, but unfortunately, his vocal trachea was destroyed. He tried for a long time but couldn't say a word. The lantern ring on his hand was still shining, as if he wanted to do something. However, the loss of vitality also took away his willpower. His vision became more and more blurred, and he vaguely saw himself becoming the emperor of the universe. In the end, he completely died in his imagination. If it was a fair fight, Mungo too wouldn't lose to Fiora by much. However, the reality was just that helpless. The two gangsters had forcefully controlled him, and he didn't even have the chance to reveal a single bit of his strength before he was directly killed. Thea was very satisfied with the cooperation of her subordinates. They skillfully defeated the boss on the other side, and she didn't even need to do anything. This man is a warrior. He deserves a proper burial. Thea put Mungo's body away after she finished speaking. It was definitely inappropriate to talk about dissecting the enemy in front of her subordinates, so she told a little white lie. When the remaining Yellow Lanterns saw that their new leader was dead, they no longer had the will to fight. Some of them quickly summoned their aircraft and fled in all directions. Some of them even surrendered and waited to be taken in. Thea was not obsessed with moral cleanliness. She had a lot of bad people under her command. Regardless of whether they were good or bad, she would take them all in and screen them out later. She didn't send anyone to chase after them. As long as she took control of the central power source and took back all the energy from the light rings, these people would be in for a good show. The lucky ones might fall directly from the sky, the weak ones would fall to their deaths on the spot, and the strong ones would fall to their deaths. The unlucky ones would fly out of the planet into space, and their rings would suddenly lose power. Those who didn't have the ability to survive in space could only wait for death. As for those who ran the fastest and had the worst luck, it was possible that their rings would lose power as soon as they entered the wormhole. Thea really didn't know what kind of horrible things would happen to them. The resistance forces were scattered. Under the guidance of a few people who led the way, the large group entered the passage without any obstructions. After walking for a short distance, Thea saw the incomparably huge central power source of the Yellow Lanterns. It was the same shape as the usual charging lanterns, but it was 100 times bigger. How uncreative! She looked around the huge power source and was a little dissatisfied. Back then, Sinisto had spent a lot of effort to accumulate that small ball of yellow energy to such a large size. However, this shape was a little speechless. The central power source of the Green Lanterns on Ura's main planet also looked like this. However, this was mainly because the little blue people didn't have any artistic cells. After billions of years, their brains had become rigid. You Sinisto can't be that unimaginative, right? It was exactly the same except for the color. From this, one could see how deeply the Green Lanterns influenced Sinisto. You're here. Why is it you? Thea separated a bit of her mental power into the central power source and accidentally bumped into the creature inside. The Parallax Demon's main body was sleeping inside. He didn't expect to meet Thea, who wasn't afraid of him. Thea also didn't expect this guy to be hiding in the central power source. The Parallax Demon didn't have any good way to deal with this human, who had feelings of fear, but wasn't afraid of him. The Parallax Demon was afraid of the existence that she was afraid of. The Parallax Demon didn't dare to conjure the images of those powerful unknown existences to scare Thea. A very strange paradox made him feel a little helpless, and he could also see that the strength of Thea's spiritual power was much stronger than before, and there was a huge difference between her and a mortal like Sinisto. He asked casually if he wanted to possess her, or if he wanted to have a strong power. You don't want either? Fine, I'll go back to sleep. You go do your thing. Thea didn't care about this kind of external fake power at all. The Parallax Demon also looked uninterested. After a simple routine, the Parallax Demon fell into a deep sleep. Retract all the energy in the light rings, Thea ordered decisively. The golden central power source received the highest order and began to roar silently. The entire planet could see yellow light gathering there. The light rings on the scene didn't differentiate between friend and foe. Except for Thea's own ring, all the energy returned to the main power source. Even in the distant outer space, accompanied by all kinds of unbelievable screams, yellow energy flew out of the light rings and gathered at Kaluga. Asona, how are you guys doing outside? We won. We won. It could be heard that the commander on the other side was so excited that he had forgotten his surname as he spoke incoherently. The rest of the battle was nothing to write home about. The tens of thousands of Kaluga resistance army fought against more than 1,000 unarmed aliens. It was a massacre. When there were only about 300 people left, Thea and Asona signed a new agreement. Both sides officially stopped fighting, and the defense of Kaluga was finally over. Asona needed to reclaim their cities. 15 cities were lost, 6 of them were in ruins. Countless lives were lost, and the loss of all kinds of resources was astronomical. Asona was busy and so was Thea. She had to accept the current members and identify the good and the bad. Some of the rings were confiscated and sent back to their original planets. Chapter 472. She did not care if the ex-Yellow Lamp members would return home and continue to wreak havoc. Lisa Draka, Aquilo and the other loyal followers of Sinisto were also rescued by them. Aquilo immediately pledged his loyalty to Thea. Thea recognized his ability to train new recruits. This guy was vulgar and rude, focused on strength and had a fierce face. He was an expert at training new recruits. Karu Hill, compared to Lisa Draka who was a little neurotic, was a rare girl among the members of the Ring of Lights. After hesitating for a while, she also chose to pledge her loyalty. It was fine if she did not speak. From afar she looked like a beautiful woman. However, when she opened her mouth was full of sharp teeth. She did not even need makeup to act in horror movies. Some beast souls lingered around her body from time to time. Even if she did not use the Ring of Lights, she could still be considered a psychic. Lisa Draka and the antimatter weapon master that Thea could not see through were left. The two of them wanted to find Sinisto. They did not have any conflict of interest with Thea. In the original time, Sinisto wanted to come back to save the people and quickly walk out of the shadow of failure. Now he might not have such great determination. Thea did not make it difficult for them. Too many elders in the army were not conducive to her control. It was also a good thing that the two of them wanted to leave. She helped them recharge the rings and politely sent them out of Koruga. All the ownerless Ring of Lights on the battlefield were collected. There was no need for more than 3,000 Yellow Lamp members. Sinisto's initial selection criteria was to control fear. Later on, it became to create fear. Perhaps it was the pressure of the Green Lantern, or perhaps it was his own mentality that caused him to forget his original intention. He began to wantonly recruit villains and villains. The elite atmosphere of the entire army was destroyed by him. Did those who controlled fear have to be bad? Just look at Batman. Sinisto had led the entire army astray. Thousands of temporary ring of lights were directly thrown back into the central power source. The return of energy made the Parallax Demon very excited. Such a beautiful environment made it have the urge to sleep for another 500 years. After removing the impurities and preserving the essence, the sea of ring of lights turned back into energy. Thea cut a part of it and distributed it to her subordinates. Deadman. Both Grid and Fiora's rings had been upgraded to the so-called elite level, which was about the same as Hal Jordan's ring. Death Knell and the other Earth companions each received an official lantern ring. The one who was the best at conjuring was Midnight Daddy. He was a magic-type character with high intelligence, and was very talented at conjuring things. He directly conjured a creature that looked like it was made up of various animals, and looked very much like an evil god. The Poison Vine Lady and the Lightning Lady lacked imagination, and the use of the light ring was more for them to wander around. Death Knell's materialization was similar to Hal Jordan's. They were all machine guns, rockets, planes, tanks, and so on. Their original imitation lantern rings did not conflict with the official lantern rings. Perhaps it was because she and Diana had magically modified them that the lantern rings did not recognize them as their own kind. The group rested in Corriga for 3 days. Including those who did not participate in the robbery and those who were loyal to Sinisto, as well as those who were originally from the battlefield. The remaining 1,000 or so in the army were reduced to 300 by her. A large number of unrelated people were thrown out of the army by her to stay where they were. Although the number of people was reduced by nearly 70%, they were more united and registered one by one. The scene of the entire army being temporary workers was gone forever. With the close connection between each other and the energy restriction of the lantern ring being lifted, it could be said that the combat power of the new Yellow Lantern ring was not reduced by much. The reorganized Yellow Lantern Corps began to withdraw from Corriga. Corriga belonged to Sector 1417 of the Green Lantern Ring. With the death of Sinisto, the new Green Lantern Ring would soon take office. Thea was not ready to fight against the main planet of OUA. So the right thing to do was to lead the team and leave. She said goodbye to Isona. Seeing that she was very cooperative, Thea left her a communicator so that she could contact her if she had any trouble in the future. Death Knell and Grud's men chose to return to their original planets. Thea began to consider the new base of the Yellow Lantern Corps. It was definitely not suitable to bring them all to Earth. Many people here were wild and difficult to tame, and there was no way to control them on Earth. The only way was to make use of their strengths and gain benefits for herself. What could these people do? They were all big and burly, and there was no way they could help the old and the young. It was even more impossible for a group of people who only had muscles for brains to do some technical research. Referring to the red light and orange light conventions, it was a good idea to find an area and dominate it. There were not many places in the universe that the Guardians could not control, but at least there were a few. Thea did not go to those remote star regions. It was not in her interest. Her plan for the future of the Yellow Lantern Corps was to be mercenaries and collect protection fees. She could find neutral locations to collect protection fees, and take on missions on a daily basis. She could train her troops and earn money, so why not? Of course, she had to be careful when choosing this target. For example, in a place like Apocalypse Star, where the people were simple and honest, even with the Mother Box technology, Thea did not have the guts to collect protection fees. The target she chose was a trading company called Ibn. This was the closest translation from Earth's language. In fact, Ibn was an interstellar alliance that focused on trade, not a shell company that could kill 3 managers with a brick. They were located in Sector 0571, and the information recorded in the light ring was Oasis Bay Starport, which belonged to Ibn Trading Company. It's really big. Fiora, who had seen a lot, could not help but exclaim. Yes, it's a good place. Thea also felt that the flying object that was slowly moving in space was too magnificent. They had modified the entire planet and used the planet's core as the power source of the spacecraft, turning the entire planet into a supersized space battleship. The central area was the original planet, about 20,000 kilometers in diameter. Countless city buildings stood on the planet's surface, and there were various kinds of aliens on the ground shuttling back and forth. As the name suggested, the port was for ships to dock. However, they did not dock ships but spaceships of various civilizations. There were parking aprons tens of thousands of kilometers around the planet, and all kinds of weapons that Thea did not recognize were densely packed as far as the eye could see. This was the crystallization of technological weapons. It was impossible to deal with without a large-scale invasion. Fiora and the other Kryptonians had always been taking whatever they saw. Seeing that Thea was a little tempted, she asked softly, "Are you interested in this place?" Thea did not answer directly. "Let's go down and take a look first." Most aliens came in spaceships, and it was rare to see a uniform like them flying through the wormhole. The person in charge of the port was very knowledgeable. He knew about the Green Lantern Corps, but he had never seen these people in yellow before. However, he did not want to offend them, so he still welcomed them. "Welcome, friends from afar. I am the ambassador of Ibn Trading Company in Oasis Base Starport." An alien creature that was not much bigger than a squirrel came in front of them in a spaceship. His tone was friendly, but the 2 rows of robots standing behind him did not look very friendly. Chapter 473. Of course, Thea couldn't say that they were here to collect some protection fees. Now that they saw that their spaceship was very good and impressive, they were fated to be with them. They planned to take it by force and use it as their base in the future. She pretended to be harmless and chatted with the squirrel-like ambassador for a while. She realized that they could communicate and the squirrel-like ambassador wouldn't violate the port's neutrality principle. There were tens of thousands of aliens coming and going here every day. Some had good tempers and some had bad tempers. He didn't have time to meddle in other people's business. After explaining a few things to take note of in a friendly manner, he left with his people. The guards seemed to be robots? They should be controlled by the main computer. Fiora kept communicating with Thea in the ring. "Don't worry. Arrange our people, Jared." Thea threw a banana at the head of the gorilla who was looking around. "Understand their organization structure. Control them from the bottom. Be careful and don't make any mistakes. Let the dead cooperate with you. Death Knell, you lead." Sia sized up Poison Vine Lady, Daddy Midnight, and Lightning Lady. These 3 people's combat power would be affected in the space environment, especially Poison Vine Lady. After leaving the plant and walking in space, she was already sweating profusely. "You take Electric Lady and the Yellow Lantern Corps to develop your connections here. Poison Ivy and I will return to Earth. Midnight. I want to take a look here and continue my old profession. I opened a small bar to inquire about news from both the black and white sides. Also, I can find a lot of magic equipment here." Old Man Midnight spoke first. The corpses that had exploded in the mud were pieced together by him. This unknown voodoo sorcerer insisted that the alien corpses could respond to his psychic arts and were of great research value. Thea thought for a while. It was not impossible. Now that her subordinates had the Yellow Lantern rings, it would be easy for them to return to Earth. Earth's magic world had regressed by 30 years because of her. It was useless to leave Midnight on Earth. "Okay, we have a lot of universal currency in our hands. We can take the money from Fiora to buy land in various facilities." No matter if it was General Zod or Sinisto, they were both rich people. Thea had ransacked their collections. Even by the standards of the universe, she was not poor. She wanted to slowly take control of the entire army. The entire process required both coercion and enticement. As long as she occupied this lucrative port and this trade alliance, loyalty and cohesion would naturally come. Investigate their main control computer. Brainiac is still a threat, so they won't develop artificial intelligence. At most, they'll use artificial intelligence. They'll create a few robot rebellions, and we'll help him solve the problem. After that, we'll be able to turn the tables. A few of his confidants knew about Gideon and nodded. Everyone split up. None of them were 1 or 2 years old, so they didn't need Thea to guide them step by step. The few people from Earth got rid of their initial fear and found that these aliens were not a big deal. Thea strolled around. Although it was called a port, it was actually a planet. With her supervision, she scanned the surroundings. There were very few residents here. The city was filled with various types of interstellar hunters, robbers, and mercenaries. There was no production of food or machinery. Everything depended on currency. She looked around and was slightly disappointed that there was no high-tech R&D facility like she had imagined. She left a few messages and returned to Earth with Poison Ivy. Thea returned to the metropolis first and found Diana. Only then did she know that Hercules had gone through another round of treatment. His own willpower was now strong enough to kill the tainted consciousness. He stopped after a little treatment. According to his original words to the Martian hunter, he wanted to rely on his own strength to defeat the devil in his heart. Did your business go well? Too well. Thea didn't do anything from the beginning to the end, and the battle was over. The corpse of the supervirus was still not found, even with Croydon's compass. Perhaps the compass didn't know what the supervirus was. She had gained a lot in these 3 days. More than 300 loyal fighters, the corpses of Mungo and Sludge, and many of Sinisto's private collections. The two girls chatted for a while before Thea left the metropolis alone and found a secluded cave. She was going to absorb the divine essence that Gaia had given her. She was already very familiar with the order of changing the magic structure in her body. First, she suppressed the 5 elements in her body and relied on her body's instinct to resonate with the divine essence. If the first time didn't work, she tried twice. If the second time didn't work, she tried thrice. Thea was very confident in her own talent. To a certain extent, as the wielder of the sacred sword, she also represented the wishes of the people. The power of the people's hearts would help her increase her chances of success. Sure enough, after 3 tries, her body and the divine power had completely merged. Thea looked carefully and found that it was the earth element magic that she urgently needed. Earth, fire, water, wind, light, and dark, the 6 elements began to form a small cycle in her body. The remaining divine power of Gaia was completely absorbed by her and turned into magic. The cycle in her body began to cycle endlessly. Thanks to the purity and thickness of Gaia's divine power, her overall magic level rapidly increased. Halfway through, she pulled out the sacred sword and underwent a heroic spirit transformation. Her body was scattered and reassembled, and during this process, many remnants of Gaia's divine power were expelled. Thea's method was simple and crude. She reduced the divine power to magic, and then broke it down and reassembled it. Whatever was not suitable for her body was discarded regardless of whether it was good or bad. It was only 2 days later that she finished absorbing the magic. She carefully felt the vigorous and resilient magic in her body. This wasn't an external object like the lantern ring. The power in her body was now the purest magic in her body. Perhaps there were powerful existences that could change reality at a higher level and rob her of her power, but those existences were still far from her. Thea had already done what she thought was the best. It seems to be a little more than I expected. After casually casting a few spells, the 6 elements were no longer restricted. The recovery and consumption of magic were also reduced by 30%. This was the benefit of having all 6 elements. At this time, her magic had already recovered to the level before she cut off her doppelganger. The previous problem of her body being stronger than her magic had been solved. Magic had once again returned to the top of her list of abilities. This made her feel quite gratified. Otherwise, it would be really embarrassing to be a mage who swung her fists every day. The increase in magic only guaranteed her future direction and height, but there was no qualitative change in her current combat power. She needed more magic or divine power. Let's not talk about whether she could win or not. The attributes of the gods were too simple, so it wasn't her best choice. Black Adam and Shazan were the 2 targets that she had never given up on. These 2 were rare people with balanced attributes. As long as she could obtain the power of either one of them, Thea was confident that she could raise her strength to the peak of the demigod realm. Chapter 474. After becoming a demigod, one would become a new god. As long as one could obtain the source, anyone at the demigod level could become a new god. It didn't have to be at the peak of the demigod level. Thea had never seen a new god before, and she didn't know the difference between a peak demigod and a normal demigod. She could only assume that being at the peak of the demigod level would result in greater achievements in the future. How to obtain the source had troubled her for a long time. If she didn't want to go to the new planet of creation, Revelation Star, and beg the Heavenly Father and Darkseid to accept her, then she could only look for the wild source. Zeus had been searching for it for thousands of years, and Thea's luck couldn't possibly be that good. Thus she only had one choice left, to find the source behind the Wall of Origins. At first, she wanted to master the 7 emotions, evolve into a white lamp, and enter the Wall of Origins. Behind the wall was a light reservoir. the source of all the emotions in the universe, the life equation, and many of the source that Thea imagined to be hanging on an apple tree. This method was dangerous and uncontrollable. Kyle Rayner could enter after turning into a white lamp. Could she do the same? Kyle lost his memory after entering the Wall of Origins. No one knew if there was something affecting him inside. It was even hard to say if the person who came out would be Kyle himself. Thea wasn't a risk-taker. As long as there was a 10% chance of failure, she would be very careful. Fortunately, another method appeared not long after. With the help of the Holy Sword and her new talent, she could use the Holy Sword to communicate with the masses. By paying a huge amount of willpower, she might be able to change the rules and lure the source out from behind the wall. Many grains of sand made a tower, and many a little made a mickle. Eventually, the impossible became possible. This method seemed much safer than banging her head against the wall. Of course, the premise was that Sia had to do a lot of things related to order. It was impossible to hook up the source with the praises of hundreds of people. According to her own calculations, saving old ladies on the roadside and helping the disabled like Superman would at most count as a portion of the power of will. This level of savings would need at least 1 billion to hook up the source. There was still a long way to go. It wasn't just the matter of willpower. Black Adam and Shazam were still nowhere to be found. The clones of the little brat Billy Batson had been made quite a number. They could even form a wrestling team. However, old Shazam still needed a few more years to complete his mission. He lived in the subspace, and if he did not come out, no one could enter. Billy was quite easy to deal with. All he had to do was seal his mouth and have the clone with the voice most similar to his shout Shazam. After obtaining the power, he could gift it to Thea. That's right, it was a direct gift. There was no need for any ceremony or sacrifice. It was safe and fast, and there would be no trouble in the future. Black Adam was much more troublesome. Thea only remembered that he was sealed somewhere in the Middle East in the original spacetime. It was the famous archaeologist Dr. Savannah who found the place where he was sealed and released him. As long as he could find the location of the seal, things would be easy. Black Adam's strength wasn't bad, but it wasn't to the extent that he couldn't be looked directly at. She could set up a trap in advance. When he came out, a group of people would surround him and beat him up. After that, they would knock him out and draw his blood to clone him. The key problem was that they couldn't find him. Thea not only planted spies in Dr. Savannah's expedition team, but also in several large expedition teams near the Middle East. However, after spending a lot of time and money, they couldn't find anything. Everything seemed to be telling her that the time wasn't right. She still needed to continue to endure. When she returned to the metropolis, she immediately began the preliminary preparations to do good deeds. Faced with the dazzling array of various difficult and complicated diseases in the market, there was no panacea. Even if there was one, she wouldn't immediately release it. Thea chose 2 diseases that were considered to have a large number of patients to begin the preliminary research and development. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which was a type of motor neuron disease. Patients generally only lived for 2 to 5 years, and there was no cure. In addition, she chose spontaneous interstitial pneumonia. The patients only had half a year to live. The only treatment at present was a lung transplant, but the success rate was pitifully low. With her profound knowledge in genetics, she led the scientists of her own group to research for half a month. The 2 new drugs began to enter the clinical stage. Compared to Luther's advanced technology, she was only developing 2 special drugs. She was not afraid of suspicion at all. However, speak of the devil. She had just left the laboratory for 2 days when Luther came knocking on her door. Seeing that he dismissed his entourage, Thea asked calmly, "What's the matter?" Both of them were in the metropolis, but they adhered to the principle of not seeing each other. This was the first time she saw Luther since the Kryptonian incident. The madman who wanted to pull Superman down from his pedestal was a little emotional today. This was a little different from his usual calm style. "You developed a special drug for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, right?" Thea thought a lot in her mind. She didn't expect him to mention the special drug. Anyway, they had entered the clinical stage. They basically knew what they needed to know. In the future, they would rely on special drugs to treat patients. There was nothing to hide. Thea nodded and readily admitted it. "Can you let me see the current clinical report?" "So urgent?" Thea was a little confused. She didn't want to steal trade secrets directly. The two companies were so large that the market for one or two special drugs was too small for them. Sure. Thea took out a thick report from her desk and handed it to him. She had no doubt that he could understand it. Luther could indeed understand it. He was also a person who had gone a long way on the path of cloning. Genetic science was not a problem for him. However, Thea relied on the knowledge of the entire universe and the Kryptonians. He had to rely on self-study, so there would definitely be blind spots that he missed. He read the first few pages of the disease introduction very quickly. He only paid attention to the treatment process and results later. Thea was busy with her work. Luther could read freely. However, it was impossible for Thea to serve him tea and give up her seat. The room was extremely quiet. Only the rustling of Thea's writing and the rustling of Luther's paper could be heard. My sister has the same disease. Luther finished reading the report and let out a long sigh. He seemed to be talking to himself. Lena Luther? Thea was a little surprised. The well-behaved little girl was still holding the shares of her new company. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. Yes, it's been a year. I also want to develop a new drug, but I haven't been sure. Your drug? Are you sure there won't be any side effects? Thea smiled. It's rare to see you so worried. Of course, I have my own confidence. You've seen the experiment report. I don't need to explain too much to you. Luther suppressed his excitement and said, "Good," 3 times in a row. He didn't talk nonsense and directly opened the door to leave Quinn Merlin Group. Chapter 475. Thea did not intend to use such a special drug to suppress Luther. She was going to gain fame anyway, so it did not matter who she gave it to. Her bottom line was not so low as to let the little girl suffer and wait for death, while she used a few pills as a bargaining chip. The clinical trial was progressing very quickly. She had a lot of follow-up plans, so she did not want to spend too much time on it. She ordered several departments to speed up production. Luther had seen the composition of the medicine, but he did not dare to give it to his sister directly. He also hoped to see her special drug on the market. Many patients were treated as guinea pigs. He had to wait and see for a while. The more patients there were, the more confidence he would have. Quinn Group's public relations was focused on the new product, and Luther was quietly pushing it from behind. The two of them worked together, and the various procedures were completed very quickly. Countless social elites helped the government to promote the magic of the two special drugs. The president urgently sought help from his staff. He almost thought that the whole country had contracted these two diseases. He was relieved to know that only a few people had contracted these diseases. He had to give face to the elites from all walks of life. Even if it was a poison, he had to approve it. He skipped the layers of approval and directly signed the approval for the special drug to be on the market. It was a terminal illness in modern medicine, but it was not a big deal in the field of genetics. They only needed to slightly adjust the internal structure of the gene. Thea's special drug had been on the market for a week, and the two diseases had been classified from terminal illnesses to the level of colds and fevers. Seeing that countless patients had been cured without any sequelae or complications, Luther bought a bunch of medicine for his sister. The little girl, who was originally lying in a wheelchair, regained basic mobility after 3 days. She was completely normal after 5 days. The little girl, Lena Luther, did not have as many concerns as her brother. She personally went to thank him. The two of them were very polite and complimented each other. Because of their opposing sides, they did not talk too much. However, from Lena's words, Thea could tell that Luther had made progress in his research on Doomsday. As for Supergirl's uncle, Norn, and the other 3 Kryptonian elites, they had all been killed by Luther. As a result of the battle of wits between the simple Kryptonians and the Earthlings, they had offered up their bodies and all their knowledge. It took Luther a lot of time to digest this gift. Now that the seed had been planted, all that was left was to water it and wait. With the corpses of the Kryptonians and the genetic technology that he had pieced together, it was not difficult to develop the remaining Doomsday genes on his own. After all, this was the super biochemical weapon that the Kryptonian scientists had developed based on their own bodies. The characteristic of the biochemical weapon was that it could be spread widely, and its structure was not difficult to construct. With Luther's intelligence, he could easily discover the huge opportunity of breeding in the Kryptonian cells. In this time and space, There was no pseudo-artificial intelligence on the Kryptonian spaceship to remind him. He probably did not know the name Doomsday, but it was enough to know that this biochemical weapon could harm Superman. Unlike in the movies, the military was also busy researching the Kryptonian genes. They did not have Luthor's high intelligence, but they had the geographical advantage. When General Zod's spaceship was broken into 3 pieces, they collected the wreckage and reverse-engineered it. Coupled with the little information left in the spaceship, they managed to achieve some initial results by relying on the strength of numbers. What surprised Thea even more was that the military had forcibly conscripted the mad scientist, Dr. Avio. Without caring about the cost, they had started Project Demogorgon. A large amount of manpower and material resources had been poured into this project. It could be said that they had carried the spirit of seeking death to the extreme. Thea could stop Luthor, but the military was more troublesome. These people were stubborn. Only when they saw the power of Doomsday would they be able to extinguish the fantasy in their hearts. Thea's plan was to sit back and watch Doomsday cause a ruckus. Then she would come out and clean up the mess. She wasn't the one who planned this, nor was she the one who supported it. No matter how she looked at it, she had nothing to do with Doomsday. The scales of order would only reward her for bravely jumping out at the crucial moment, and would not blame her for it. However, she was not going to just sit around and wait. Some basic preparations still had to be done. She had collected a lot of kryptonite in the early stages. It was more than enough to make a few weapons. However, she did not completely trust her memory. Reality had changed too much. If she did things according to her fixed thinking, it would be troublesome. She began to carefully study Doomsday's cells. She had done so several times. She could not understand why Doomsday, who resembled the holy warrior of the DC world, could not use the same move twice. It should be known that Doomsday was able to withstand Darkseid's Omega Ray in the later stages. Omega Ray represented the source. Doomsday's body could evolve without limit. Every time he was killed, he would be immune to the previous fatal damage when he was resurrected. This ability was not something his body possessed. It was provided by the continuous evolution of his cells. Sia's research showed that each of its cells was actually a tiny individual. Doomsday was more like a collection of wills. Its body relied on a special kind of energy to pile up all its cells, forming a powerful individual that the world saw. From the looks of his cells, did this guy have a soul? On the surface, he did not have a soul in the traditional sense. However, the collective will formed by the many cell wills was extremely chaotic. This made him immune to most control magic in the world. Thea tried to duplicate a few of his cells. She found that they fused very quickly. However, they devoured each other to evolve. The madness revealed by this made her a little scared. This was not a creature that should exist in this world. The Kryptonian scientists had not come up with a countermeasure for tens of thousands of years. She also did not plan to destroy it in the path of science. The advantage of having all 6 elements was that Thea could cast any spells. She could even cast some more powerful combination spells. The cell's ability to absorb the 4 elements was top-notch. They hated the light element and did not like the dark element either. Thea experimented with both light and dark spells. Finally, she found a spell that worked. It was aging, a spell that combined the dark element, wind element, and water element. The vitality of the cells affected by the spell decreased visibly. In order to resist the spell, the cells would release all the vitality in the cells in an instant. For a short period of time, the vitality of the cells would be boosted. After that, the output of magic would increase, and the cells would quickly die due to exhaustion. After experimenting with a few spells, she also tested the power of emotion. The emotion of fear was the same as the will of death and destruction in the cells. Doomsday could not replicate the emotion of fear, which was contrary to its basic form of existence. However, fear could not do anything to it.